There is a price you pay when someone decides to destroy you in public, and I learned that price on a Tuesday night at 9:42 p.m. I was standing in my kitchen, rinsing a single wine glass, when my husband's voice came through the speakerphone in the living room. He was laughing with someone, relaxed, confident, talking about timing. They were discussing where I should be sitting and who should be filming. My dog kept scratching at the back door even though it had just been let in. That was the moment I realized everything I trusted was already scheduled to end. There is a price you pay when someone decides to destroy you in public, and I learned that price on a Tuesday night at 9:42 p.m. I was standing at the sink in our kitchen in Plano, Texas, rinsing a single wine glass because I didn't want the dishwasher to rattle and wake my husband. The house was quiet in that specific way it gets after 9, when the air conditioner cycles down and the hallway lights feel too bright. The smell of lemon dish soap clung to my fingers. My phone sat face down on the counter beside a grocery receipt and a roll of aluminum foil I'd used to wrap leftovers. I could hear my husband's voice coming from the living room, easy and warm, the voice he used on clients and neighbors and my parents. He'd put his phone on speaker like he always did when he wanted his hands free to scroll. At first, it was normal. Brent could talk for 20 minutes about nothing, football, traffic, what he'd eaten for lunch, and make it sound like a victory speech. I listened without meaning to, because that's what happens when you've spent years learning the temperature of someone else's moods. I dried my hands on a dish towel that still had a faint bleach line from the last time I tried to get a stain out. I glanced at the clock on the microwave and watched the seconds tick forward like they were counting down to something I didn't know I'd agreed to. Then, his laugh changed. It got flatter, meaner at the edges, like he was performing for an audience that wasn't me. "Man, she's not going to see it coming," a second voice said, loud enough that I could hear the smile in it. Wade, Brent's best friend since college. The guy who called me kiddo, even though I was 34 and had a mortgage and a job and a husband who treated me like a household appliance. Wade had been in our house 2 nights earlier, eating my chili out of a bowl I'd set in front of him, telling Brent he was living the dream. I stood still with the towel in my hands. Brent said, "She'll be in her usual spot, right side, near my mom. I'll make sure." Wade whistled softly. "You're doing it at the fundraiser? Where else?" Brent's voice sounded pleased with itself. "That's the whole point. Everyone's there. Board members, donors, my boss, her parents. She likes to play the perfect wife in front of her dad. Let her do that one more time." My mouth went dry. The charity fundraiser, the Harvest and Hope Gala for the Dallas Children's Food Alliance, the organization I worked for. It wasn't just a dinner. It was the biggest night of our year, the night we raised enough money to keep our weekend backpack program running through spring. I'd been planning it for months. I had spreadsheets and vendor contracts and seating charts taped inside a binder that never left my work bag. I'd picked the linens and centerpieces and the exact shade of gold for the printed programs. I'd been stressed and tired and proud, the way you are when something matters and you're the one holding it together. Brent had insisted we invite both our families. "It'll be fun," he'd said. "They can finally see what you do." He'd bought a tux. He'd told me to order a new dress. He'd acted supportive in the way he acted supportive when it cost him nothing. In the living room, Wade said, "You sure she won't freak out? Like crying, yelling, making a scene?" Brent laughed again, and it landed like something heavy dropping onto tile. "That's what I'm counting on. She'll either melt down or beg. Either way, it's done." I didn't breathe. I focused on the objects in front of me. The white ceramic sink, the chrome faucet, the sponge squeezed into a green plastic caddy, the little crack in the corner of the countertop from when we moved in, and Brent said it was my fault for putting a cast iron pan down too hard. I stared at the crack as if it were a map. Wade said, "What are you telling her? That you're taking her job away too?" Brent lowered his voice slightly, but the speaker carried it anyway. "I'm not taking her job away. She's doing that to herself. I'm just helping the room see what she is." My heart thudded once. Hard. I pressed the dish towel against the counter until my knuckles ached. "What she is," Wade repeated, amused. "Damn." Brent's tone turned practical. "Make sure you're positioned where you can get her face. I want it clean. No heads in the way. And don't screw up the audio this time." Wade chuckled. "I'm not your intern, bro. You were last time," Brent said. "Remember at Nate's engagement party? You got the confession, but the audio sounded like it was recorded in a microwave." They both laughed, and my skin went cold, because I suddenly understood this wasn't new behavior. This was a hobby. This was entertainment. A small sound came from behind me. Our dog, Maple, was at the back door scratching at the glass with a slow, repetitive motion, even though I'd let her out 15 minutes earlier, and she'd come back in and circled twice before settling. She scratched again, nails clicking softly. I watched her, waiting for her to stop, because somehow that would make the moment less real. She didn't stop. In the living room, Brent said, "Look, it's simple. I'll do it after the auction. When everyone's relaxed, I'll make the speech. Praise her. Thank her for her service. Then I'll hand her the envelope. I'll keep it classy. She's the one who'll turn it ugly," Wade said. "And then what? She moves out?" Brent made a sound like he was tasting something sweet. "She can't afford to stay. That's the best part. The house is in my name. And her little nonprofit salary? Please. The house was in his name because he'd made sure it was. When we bought it, he'd been the one with the bigger income. He said it made sense to put it under him for the loan. He'd told me it didn't matter because we were married, because it was ours. I'd believed him, because believing him was easier than fighting him, and because I was tired then too, tired from wedding planning and moving and starting a new job and trying to be the woman who smiled at neighborhood barbecues and didn't make things difficult," Wade asked. "You already filed?" Brent paused, and that pause made my stomach flip, because it meant he was proud. "Not yet. But my attorney has everything. I'm not stupid. I'm just waiting on the timing." "Timing," Wade repeated. "Man, you're cold." Brent didn't deny it. "She's been riding my coattails for years. Everybody thinks she's some kind of saint because she feeds kids and posts those cute photos online. Let's see how saintly she is when she's cornered." 8. I thought about the last photo I'd posted. A row of donated backpacks lined up on a table, bright colors, zipper tags, a volunteer's hands tying ribbons. I'd written a caption about community and gratitude, because that's what you write when you're trying to raise money and keep people caring. Brent had rolled his eyes and said, "So dramatic." Then he'd asked if I could order more steak seasoning because he was out. My throat tightened with something that wasn't just betrayal. It was disgust, sharp and clean. I pictured him standing under ballroom lights with a microphone in his hand, smiling like a hero, while I sat there with my family watching, waiting for my face to crumble. I pictured Wade's phone angled toward me. I pictured my father's expression when he realized he'd brought my mother to a public execution. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. Wade said, "What about her board people? Won't that backfire?" Brent snorted. "Backfire how? I'm giving them a show. Half those donors come for drama anyway. Plus, I've got a couple of friends in that room who owe me favors. They'll back my version of events." My mind grabbed onto that phrase like it had teeth. His version of events. He was planning a story. A clean narrative, where I was unstable, ungrateful, probably hysterical. Where he was, the patient husband finally setting boundaries. Where the envelope was a brave decision instead of a blade. "Just don't let her run to her little work friends," Wade added. "You know how women are? They circle the wagons." Brent laughed softly. "She doesn't have wagons. She has coworkers, and I'm about to make sure they see her as a liability." A simple picture flashed in my head. My office, the conference table, my boss's tight smile, the board chair's polite distance. If Brent made me look unstable at the gala, it wouldn't just be embarrassment. It would be credibility. It would be my job. It would be the thing I'd built with my own hands being pulled out from under me in front of an audience. I set the dish towel down neatly by the sink, like I was finishing a task. I looked at my hands. They weren't shaking. That surprised me. I expected shaking, because I'd shaken before after fights, after his little comments that landed like needles, after he'd corrected me at parties, after he'd called my work cute. But in that moment, my hands were steady. My pulse was loud in my ears, but my fingers were calm. I walked quietly to the kitchen island and picked up my phone. The screen lit my face. I turned the sound off completely. I opened the camera without thinking and started recording a video of nothing, just the countertop, the receipt, the foil roll because I needed something, anything, that showed time was moving, and I was still standing. Then I angled it toward the living room hallway. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to catch the sound. I didn't know if it would be usable. I didn't know if it mattered. I only knew that if they were treating my life like a game, I needed to start keeping score. "From the living room," Brent said. Anyway, it's done. Next Saturday, 8 p.m. She'll be in that dress I paid for, trying to smile like everything's fine. Then she'll open the envelope, and the whole room will finally see who she really is. I stared at the phone screen, at the red dot blinking. I thought of the gala's printed programs stacked in boxes at my office, my name on the inside page as event director. I thought of the children whose names I knew because I'd read their intake forms and packed their food bags myself when we were short-staffed. I thought of my mother, who still called me honey and asked if Brent was taking good care of me. I thought of the way Brent kissed my cheek in front of people, like he was stamping his approval. Maple scratched the door again. Calm, steady, like a metronome. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into the living room and confront him. I didn't throw the wine glass. I didn't do any of the things Brent had probably rehearsed in his head, the things he would label as proof. I stood in my kitchen, in bare feet on cool tile, listening to my husband plan my humiliation like it was a weekend project. And in that quiet, ordinary room, with a roll of foil and a grocery receipt and a dog scratching at a back door she didn't need opened, I understood something with a clarity that felt almost physical. Next Saturday wasn't going to be the night he proved I was nothing. Next Saturday was going to be the night I found out exactly how much he'd hidden, exactly what he'd been doing behind my back, and exactly what kind of person he became when he thought I couldn't fight back. Because if he was so sure I would collapse, it meant he'd never once considered that I might be watching him the way I watched budgets, timelines, and details. It meant he'd never once considered that I could take a plan and make it mine. And as the microwave clock clicked from 9:42 to 9:43, I realized the version of my marriage I'd been living in was already over. I just hadn't been told yet. I went to bed that night like nothing had happened. That was the first decision I made. And it felt like swallowing something sharp without making a face. Brent came into the bedroom at 10:17, fresh from whatever calm satisfaction men like him get from planning other people's pain. He brushed his teeth with the bathroom door open, humming under his breath, and when he climbed into bed, he put his hand on my hip, the way he did when he wanted to remind himself I was there. His palm was warm through the thin cotton of my pajama pants. I stared at the ceiling fan, turning in slow circles, and made myself breathe evenly. "You still up?" he asked. "Just tired," I said, and my voice came out normal. That was the second decision. Normal voice, no edge, no questions. He rolled onto his back and pulled his phone to his chest like it was a talisman. The light from the screen flashed across his face in quick bursts. He was texting. Probably Wade. Probably someone else too. He didn't bother to hide it. He never did. Brent didn't believe in hiding from me because he didn't believe I was capable of seeing. When his breathing finally deepened, I slipped out of bed and walked barefoot to the laundry room. I shut the door softly behind me and sat on the closed lid of the washing machine. The room smelled like detergent pods and dryer sheets. The overhead light was too bright, and I didn't turn it on. I let the dark settle around me and I checked my phone. The video I'd recorded was almost useless as footage. It showed a countertop and the corner of a hallway. But the audio was clear enough. Brent's voice, Wade's voice, next Saturday. The envelope. Make sure you get her face. I played 10 seconds and stopped, because I didn't want to hear it again. Once was enough. My hands still weren't shaking. My stomach felt like it had dropped out and taken my lungs with it. But my hands were steady. I emailed the file to an old Gmail address I hadn't used since college. Then I emailed it to the work account I kept for myself, separate from my organization's main server. I labeled the subject line, Gala, like it was just another vendor quote. Then I opened a notes app and typed the time and date. Tuesday. 9:42 p.m. Plano. Speakerphone. I sat there until my legs fell asleep, listening to the house settle. A pipe clicked somewhere in the wall. Maple shifted in her bed and sighed. There was nothing dramatic about it. That almost made it worse. This wasn't a screaming fight or a slammed door. It was a man who could plan a public humiliation between brushing his teeth and scrolling his phone, then sleep like a baby. The next morning, Brent was in a good mood. That's how you can tell when someone feels in control. He made coffee in our expensive machine, the one he insisted on buying because the cheap ones taste like motel. He poured himself a travel mug and didn't offer me any. He never did unless there were guests. I made my own with the drip maker I'd bought at Target when he said my little habits were cluttering the counter. "You working late again?" he asked, loosening his tie in the mirror by the front door. Probably, I said. I was always working late in the weeks before the gala. He liked to complain about it because it made him sound like a patient husband. She's married to her job. He'd tell people with a laugh, like it was charming. He kissed my cheek, and I caught the scent of his cologne. It wasn't the one I'd bought him for our anniversary. That bottle sat untouched on his dresser like a prop. This scent was sharper, newer. I watched him adjust his cufflinks, the silver ones engraved with his initials, and I thought about how he liked to carve his name into everything. He'd put his name on the house deed. He'd put his name on the car title. He'd put his name on the Christmas card every year in larger font than mine. It wasn't love. It was a claim. After he left, I didn't cry. I walked into the kitchen and packed my lunch like I always did. Leftover chicken, rice, a small container of strawberries. I took the same insulated bag. I put my work binder into my tote and my laptop on top of it. I checked the list of calls I had to make that day, and I drove to downtown Dallas through morning traffic while the radio talked about weather and accidents. The sky was pale and cloudless. Everything looked normal, which meant I had to force myself to remember it wasn't. At work, the gala had already taken over the entire floor. Boxes of programs, centerpiece samples, volunteer sign-up sheets taped to the break room wall. My assistant, Marissa, waved when I walked in. She was 26, bright, always chewing mint gum, and she looked at me like I had the answers because I usually did. "Morning, Avery," she said. "The catering guy called twice. He needs the final head count. Tell him he'll have it by 3, I said. My boss, Denise, stuck her head out of her office. "Avery, you've got a minute?" I followed her in. Denise's office smelled like black coffee and lavender hand lotion. Her desk was neat in a way mine never was during crunch time. She had a framed photo of her kids at Disney and a stack of board packets ready to go. "We got confirmation that Halstead & Klein is bringing 6 more guests," she said. "That pushes us over the original seating plan. I'll adjust," I said automatically. Denise watched me for a beat. "You okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it as much as I could. I left her office and sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen without seeing it. In the corner of my monitor was a sticky note I'd written to myself. Gala. Auction items, stage cues, speaker order. Stage cues, speaker order. Snage? Brent had said he'd make a speech. I'd thought it was because he wanted to support me. Of course he wanted the microphone. Of course he wanted the room looking at him. By noon, I knew I couldn't keep this inside my body without it turning into something poisonous. Not because I wanted to vent, because I needed someone who could think clearly with me, someone who understood systems and contracts and consequences, someone who didn't look at Brent and see charm. There was one person who came to mind, and it wasn't my mother or my sister. It was Paige Corbin. Paige and I met in college at UT Austin. We were the 2 women in a leadership program full of guys who loved the sound of their own confidence. Paige had gone to law school and built a practice in Dallas that handled employment disputes and nonprofit compliance. She'd been the kind of friend who didn't ask you why you stayed. She asked you what you needed to leave. We hadn't talked as much after I married Brent. That wasn't an accident. Brent had always found a way to make my friendships feel inconvenient. Too loud, too political, in my head. I pulled up her number anyway. My finger hovered over it for a second. Then I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring. "Avery?" "Well, damn." "Hey, are you free today?" I asked. There was a pause that felt like she was reading me through the phone. "What's going on?" "I need 15 minutes, I said. "Maybe 30. Come by at 4, she said. "I'm on Cedar Springs. Ask for me at the front." In one, I hung up and my lungs expanded like I'd been holding my breath for a year. The rest of the day moved in task lists and deadlines. I signed off on the floral order. I approved the print proof. I fielded a call from a donor who wanted her name spelled a certain way on the program. I smiled at people. I said, "Of course," and "Absolutely," and "We'll make it happen." It was muscle memory. My body knew how to perform competence, even while my mind was replaying Brent's voice. At 3:45, I told Marissa I had an appointment. I drove to Paige's office with my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel like I was 16 again and trying not to fail a test. Her building was modern glass, with a lobby that smelled like polished stone. Paige came out to meet me herself. Tall, sharp, Hair pulled back. Blazer like armor. She didn't hug me. Paige wasn't a hugger when something was wrong. She led me into her office, shut the door, and said, "Talk." This no have. I took my phone out and set it on her desk. My fingers were still steady. That was the part that scared me most, because it meant something in me had already shifted into survival mode. "I heard Brent last night," I said. "He's planning to humiliate me at the gala." Paige's face didn't change much, but her eyes narrowed. "How?" I told her. The envelope, the speech, the filming, the way he said he was going to make the room. See what I really was. I didn't dramatize it. I gave details like I was reciting meeting notes. Times, names, phrases. Paige listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Do you have proof?" I slid my phone across the desk. "Audio. It's not perfect, but you can hear him." Paige tapped the screen, listened for a few seconds, then stopped it. She exhaled through her nose, slow. "Okay," she said. "First, you're not crazy. This is real. Second, don't confront him. Not yet." "I wasn't going to," I said. My voice surprised me. It was calm. Paige leaned back in her chair. "Tell me what the gala means to you. Like legally. Your role. Your access. Any contracts in your name. Anything tied to your employment." I blinked. "Why?" "Because," Paige said, "men like your husband don't just want to embarrass you. They want to break the parts of your life they can't control. And reputation is leverage." Leverage. That word settled into my chest, like a weight and a weapon at the same time. I opened my tote bag and pulled out my binder, the one filled with gala contracts and vendor agreements and seating charts. The spine was bent from use. I set it on Paige's desk, like I was placing something heavy down after carrying it too long. "This is everything," I said. "If he wants to end me in public, it's going to be right here." Paige flipped the binder open, scanning the tabs with quick eyes. Sponsorship agreements. Venue contract. Auction consignment forms. Insurance policies. She didn't read like a casual person. She read like someone looking for pressure points. Then she looked up at me and said, "Avery, I need you to be honest. Is there anything he could say in that room that would make your board question you?" I thought of Brent's confidence. The way he said he had people who owed him favors. The way he wanted to control the narrative. "He could lie," I said. "He could say I mishandled funds. He could say I'm unstable. He could—" Paige held up a hand. "Stop. We're not doing hypotheticals. We're doing facts. What does he have? And what do you have?" The question landed hard. Because the truth was, until last night, I hadn't been collecting anything. I'd been surviving. I'd been trying to keep the peace. I'd been trying to be good enough that he wouldn't sharpen his cruelty. And now I was staring at the simple reality that peace was never the goal for him. Control was. "I have that recording," I said. "And I have years. Little things. The way he talks. The way he treats me in front of people." Paige's eyes stayed on mine. "Little things don't win. Paper wins. Records win. Timelines win." She stood up, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a yellow legal pad. She set it in front of me with a pen. "Start writing," she said. "Dates, incidents, money, anything that can be verified. And Avery, listen to me. If he's planning a public hit, there's a reason. He's trying to get ahead of something. People don't stage a scene unless they're hiding a bigger one." My throat tightened. "Like what?" Paige's voice stayed level. "Affair. Financial mess. Fraud. Something. We're going to figure out what it is. But you can't do this alone, and you can't do it out loud." I picked up the pen. The tip hovered over the blank page. In my head, I saw Brent at the gala under warm ballroom lights, holding a microphone, smiling like the hero of my story. I saw Wade's phone angled toward me. I saw my father in a suit, my mother clutching her purse, both of them thinking they were there to support my work. And then I saw myself, not crying, not begging, not collapsing the way Brent had bet on. I saw a version of me with a timeline in her hand, with documents in a folder, with someone like Paige beside her. The pen touched paper. I wrote, Tuesday, 9:42 p.m. Heard Brent and Wade planning public humiliation at gala. Speakerphone. Get her face. Envelope. Everyone's there. Paige watched me write. And then she said something so quietly, it almost felt like a kindness. Good, she said. Now we start counting. That night, I came home and made dinner like I always did, because routine was the only thing in the house that didn't belong to Brent. I took chicken out of the fridge, cut it into even pieces, and heated a skillet until the oil shimmered. Maple sat near my feet, watching the floor like something might fall. The kitchen light cast a clean square on the counter, and I stayed inside that square like it was a boundary line. When Brent walked in at 6:38, he smelled like citrus and the same sharp cologne. He loosened his tie before he even said hello. "What's for dinner?" he asked, like my presence was implied and my effort was required. "Stir fry," I said. "Rice is almost done." He glanced at the pan, then at me. "Try not to overcook it. Last time it was kind of dry." "Okay," I said, because I wasn't going to argue about chicken. Not tonight. He poured himself a drink bourbon, 2 fingers, no ice, and leaned against the island while I cooked. He scrolled on his phone with his thumb and made small noises that meant he was reading something interesting or irritating. When he looked up, his eyes traveled over me, the way they always did lately, like he was checking a list. "Makeup? Hair? Mood? Compliance? You still running around for that thing?" he asked. "The gala," I said. "Yeah." He took a sip. My mom texted. "She's excited. Don't embarrass yourself with that speech you're always practicing." I hadn't been practicing a speech. I wasn't even speaking at the gala. But he liked to create the version of me he could correct, because then he got to be the authority. "I'll be fine," I said, and flipped the chicken with a wooden spoon. He smiled like he didn't believe me. "Just remember, those donor people are not your friends. They'll drop you the second you look messy." And exampled. The words were casual, almost helpful. And that's how he did it. He never had to raise his voice to make you feel small. He just spoke like his opinion was the air you breathed. We ate at the kitchen table. He talked about his day, new listings, a client who didn't understand value, a lender who couldn't do basic math. Brent was a real estate broker who treated every conversation like a negotiation and every person like a resource. He talked about money the way other people talked about weather. I nodded in the right places and kept my eyes on my plate. When he asked me about my day, it wasn't because he cared. It was because he wanted material. "Who was annoying today?" he asked. "Nobody," I said. "Just busy." He made a disappointed sound. "You never have good stories. It's like your job is just emails." I chewed and swallowed. My job was feeding kids on weekends. My job was making sure families didn't have to choose between gas and groceries. My job was turning a room full of wealthy strangers into funding for something that mattered. But to Brent, if it didn't produce applause for him, it was nothing. After dinner, he went into the living room and turned on a sports show. The volume was loud enough to fill the house, loud enough to make me feel like I couldn't think. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, wiping the counters, rinsing plates, loading the dishwasher. Maple scratched at the back door again, the same slow click, 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 even though she'd been outside. I opened it and she stared into the dark yard like she was listening for something. "Knock it off," Brent called from the couch. "That dog is getting annoying." I shut the door and locked it. My hands moved smoothly. My face stayed neutral. Then I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed with my work tote in my lap. Paige's yellow legal pad had changed something in me. It wasn't courage. It wasn't even hope. It was orientation. When your life is being rewritten by someone else, you either start documenting or you disappear. I pulled out my binder and flipped to the tab labeled Finance. Inside were invoices, sponsor pledges, vendor deposits. At the top was our gala budget, broken down in neat columns. I stared at the numbers until they stopped looking like a normal workload and started looking like a battlefield. Brent thought the gala was a stage for my humiliation. Paige thought it was a reason, a distraction, a smokescreen. People didn't create a spectacle unless they were trying to cover a different story with noise. So I opened my laptop and logged into our donor management system from home. I wasn't supposed to. Not officially. Denise trusted me, and our IT setup was minimal because nonprofits stretch every dollar until it squeaks. I had access because I needed it to do my job. I told myself I was checking head counts and sponsor tables because that was true. But I was also looking for anything that didn't fit. The sponsor list loaded. I scanned names. Local banks, law firms, a car dealership, a healthcare group. Then I saw it, and my stomach tightened. Brent Winslow Realty Group, presenting sponsor $25,000. I sat very still. Brent had never mentioned sponsoring the gala. In fact, he'd mocked the whole thing. He'd called it, "your little fundraiser," and complained about my late nights. He'd said my organization was always begging, always taking. And now his name was at the top. I clicked into the record. The pledge date was last Friday. The contact email listed was not Brent's usual one. It was a Gmail address I didn't recognize. The phone number was his. The payment method showed pending transfer. I stared at the screen until my eyes felt dry. A presenting sponsor wasn't a casual donation. It came with visibility, branding, stage time, a microphone. It came with the exact thing Brent always wanted, control of the room. I clicked on the attached note. It was short. Sponsor requests, brief speaking slot before auction. Confirmed by Avery. Confirmed by Avery. My throat closed. I had not confirmed anything. I hadn't even known about it. I moved the cursor and hovered over the note like I could erase it with my eyes. My fingers stayed steady, but my heart started beating faster, loud enough I could hear it over the TV. He was using my name inside my own workplace. I took screenshots. 1, 2, 3, the sponsor page, the note, the email address, the pledge date. Then I emailed them to myself the same way I had the audio file. Subject line, sponsor record. Oh. A knock of laughter came from the living room, Brent reacting to something on TV, and it made me flinch. I closed the laptop halfway, not because he could see it from where he was, but because some part of me still acted like hiding was safety. Then I forced myself to open it again. I clicked into our internal event email chain, searching for Winslow. There were messages I hadn't seen. A thread between Denise, the board chair, and someone named Greg Hanley. Greg was a businessman who sat on our board because he had connections and money. He'd always been polite to me in that distant way. People are polite to staff. They don't want to know too well. The email chain was recent, 2 days ago. Greg. Brent is eager to help. Says he wants more involvement. Also flagged some concerns about Avery's handling of vendor payments. We should discuss. Greg. Denise. Concerns? Avery's been solid. What is this about? Greg. He said he can explain at the gala. Maybe best to address privately first. My mouth went numb. I read the lines again. Vendor payments. Concerns. Explain at the gala. That was his method. He wasn't just going to hand me an envelope. He was going to poison the room against me first. He was laying groundwork so that when he embarrassed me, people would already be leaning away. I didn't know what he meant by concerns, but I knew what he was trying to do. He was building a story where I was sloppy, untrustworthy, emotional, a liability. And he was doing it using a check with his name on it like a weapon wrapped in generosity. I took more screenshots. I saved the email thread as a PDF. I sent it to myself. Then I opened a blank document and typed the date and time. Wednesday, 9:14 p.m. Found Brent's company listed as presenting sponsor. Note falsely claims I confirmed speaking slot. Email chain suggests concerns about my vendor payments. I could hear Brent's footsteps coming down the hallway. I shut the laptop and slid it into my tote. I picked up my phone and opened a harmless text thread with Marissa, like I'd been checking volunteer assignments. Brent leaned into the doorway, one hand on the frame. You still doing gala stuff? Just messaging a volunteer, I said. We're short on check-in. He rolled his eyes. You're always short on something. Just make sure you don't look tired. You look older when you're stressed. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Then he walked away. When his footsteps faded, I stayed motionless for a full minute, listening to the TV volume swell again. The house felt like it had an extra layer of noise now, as if the walls were participating. I waited until I was sure he wasn't coming back. Then I pulled my phone back out and called Paige. She answered fast. Hey, I found something, I said. Tell me? Brent's company is listed as presenting sponsor for the gala, I said, keeping my voice low. There's a note in the record saying I confirmed a speaking slot. I didn't. And there's an email from our board chair saying Brent flagged concerns about my vendor payments. There was a short silence, the kind that happens when someone is rearranging the whole picture in their head. Paige said, Okay. That's not charity. That's leverage. He's trying to get inside your organization's decision-making. Yes, I said, and my hands tightened around the phone. And he's using my name, Talvant. Paige's voice stayed steady. Don't touch any records at work. Don't forward anything from your work email to personal unless it's already public. Just capture what you're allowed to capture and document access. And Avery, this is important. If he's planting concerns about vendor payments, he may already be moving money around. Or blaming you for money he moved. My stomach dropped again, deeper this time. How would he? He doesn't need your password if he has a board member in his pocket, Paige said. Or if he's been talking to vendors. Or if he's using his sponsorship as a cover to demand information. I stared at the closed laptop on my bed like it was a live wire. What do I do? Paige didn't hesitate. Tomorrow, you go to work like normal. You smile. You keep planning the gala. And you start pulling copies of vendor invoices and payment approvals the way you normally would. You build a clean timeline. If he's setting you up, we're going to catch the setup. I swallowed. My throat felt raw. And the sponsor note? We'll deal with it, Paige said. But not with a phone call. Not with an accusation. Paper. Avery. We answer paper with paper. When I hung up, I sat on the bed and looked around my room. Brent's suits hung on his side of the closet in plastic garment bags. His watch collection sat in a case on his dresser like trophies. My clothes were folded in drawers because he didn't like visual clutter. The air smelled faintly of his cologne. Even in here, there were pieces of my life everywhere that had been arranged to accommodate him. And now he was reaching into the one place I had that didn't revolve around his name. My work, my reputation, the thing I built, and he was trying to put his fingerprint on it too. I went into the bathroom and opened the cabinet under the sink. Behind extra toilet paper and a box of tampons, there was a small space where Brent never looked. I put my phone in there for a second and stared at it like I was memorizing its weight, the way it contained the proof of what I'd heard and what I'd found. Then I took it out and walked back to the bedroom. I opened my tote and pulled out the legal pad Paige gave me. The page I'd started the day before stared back. Dates, lines, a beginning. I added a new entry. Wednesday night. Discovered Brent inserted himself into gala sponsorship. Falsified confirmation in my name. Board chair discussing concerns raised by Brent. Possible setup related to vendor payments. I set the pad down and looked at the clock. 10:22 p.m. From the living room, Brent laughed at something on TV, loud and easy, like a man with nothing to fear. And sitting there on my side of the bed, I realized the gala wasn't just the stage where he planned to break me. It was the stage where he planned to tell everyone who I was. The only problem was, he'd started writing that story early. And so had I. Thursday morning, I woke up before my alarm. The bedroom was still dark, the kind of dark that makes you feel like you're floating instead of lying on a mattress. Brent's breathing was steady beside me. His arm was thrown over the pillow he used to keep between us because he said, I ran hot, and it messed with his sleep. I lay still and listened to the house. The faint hum of the air conditioner, Maple shifting in her bed, a car passing outside on our quiet cul-de-sac. My phone was under my pillow, face down, on silent. I slid it out and checked the time. 5:26 a.m. I didn't check Brent's phone. I didn't creep around like a caricature of a suspicious wife. Not because I was above it, but because Paige had been clear. Facts, paper, records, timelines. If he was setting me up, the truth wasn't going to be in his text messages. It was going to be in the system, in the places where people assumed I wouldn't know how to look. I got up, dressed in the dark, and drove to the office early. The parking garage was almost empty. The lobby smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner. When the elevator doors opened on our floor, the fluorescent lights made everything look a little too honest. I went straight to my desk and pulled out the vendor folder from my bottom drawer. For the next hour, I did what I always did, only slower. I pulled the catering invoice. The venue deposit. I cross-checked every payment approval against the email chain where Denise had signed off. I pulled bank transaction confirmations from our nonprofits account the way I was authorized to, because I handled event finances. Everything was neat. Everything was documented. My name appeared where it should appear. Denise's approval appeared where it should appear. No missing zeros. No strange vendors. No last-minute wires. My shoulders loosened a fraction. Maybe Brent was just using the sponsor slot as a way to get the microphone. Maybe the vendor payment concerns was just vague poison with no substance behind it. Then I opened the floral vendor file. The invoice amount was wrong. It wasn't wildly wrong. That was the problem. It was the kind of wrong that could pass if you were tired, if you were rushing, if you trusted the system. The invoice showed $8,450. I remembered the original quote. It was $6,450. Same number of centerpieces, same delivery date, same everything. But the invoice had 2 extra line items: premium glass rental and rush labor. I frowned and pulled the email chain with the florist. There was no mention of premium glass, no rush labor. We'd finalized the design 3 weeks earlier. There was no rush. There was no last-minute change. I opened the PDF more closely. The invoice had our nonprofit's logo at the top. It had the florist's name. It had what looked like an approval signature at the bottom. My name. It wasn't my signature, not really. It was a sloppy version of it, like someone had seen me sign a credit card receipt and tried to imitate it in a hurry. The skin on my arms went cold. I sat very still and stared at that signature like it might change if I looked away. It didn't. I checked the date on the invoice. It was dated Monday. Monday afternoon? I'd been in a meeting with Denise and the board chair for 2 hours. I hadn't touched anything floral that day. I took a screenshot. Then another. I saved the invoice to a secure folder on my work drive the way I was allowed to. I made a note of the file path. Marissa arrived at 8:05 carrying an iced coffee the size of her head. "You're here early," she said, dropping into her chair. "Couldn't sleep," I said. She smiled sympathetically. "Gala brain. Same. To do." I watched her open her laptop, tap her nails against the keyboard, and I had to force myself not to ask her a question that would give away everything. Marissa was good, but she was young and trusting, and she'd never lived in a house with someone who planned cruelty like a birthday surprise. At 8:30, Denise walked out of her office. "Morning," she called. "Avery, can you come in for a second?" My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. I followed her into her office and shut the door behind me. Denise sat down and gestured for me to take the chair across from her. She looked tired. She'd been carrying this organization for years, and the gala week always made her look like she hadn't had a full night's sleep in months. "I got another email from Greg," she said, sliding her phone across the desk so I could see. "He keeps hinting about concerns. It's vague, but it's bothering me." I looked at the screen. Greg's message was short. "We should talk about vendor approvals. Brent says there are some irregularities. Donors will notice if things aren't handled correctly." Denise sighed. "Do you have any idea what this is about?" I could have told her everything right then. I could have said, "My husband is planning to humiliate me at the gala. He's sponsoring it for access. He's trying to poison you against me. He falsified a note in the system. And I just found an invoice with a fake signature." I could have dumped it all in her lap like a bag of broken glass and asked her to protect me. But Paige's voice was in my head. "Paper. Answer paper with paper." So I said, "I'm not aware of any issues. I can pull a full approval log for you. Every invoice, every sign-off, every payment confirmation." Denise's shoulders dropped slightly. "That would make me feel better. I'll have it by end of day," I said. Denise nodded. 2. My heart did a hard, ugly jump. Denise kept going, like she was mentioning a normal donor call. He was very engaged. Asked a lot of questions about the program numbers, the budget, the way we allocate funds. He said he's excited to be a presenting sponsor. I held my expression steady. "That's generous." Denise studied me. "He also asked about your role. Like, very specifically. What you approve, what you handle." I thought it was odd, but maybe he just wanted to understand. "Well," I nodded slowly. "Maybe." Denise leaned forward. "Avery, is everything okay at home?" The question was gentle, but it hit like a spotlight. For a second, I felt the urge to smile and say, "Yes, of course. Just stressed. Gala week. You know." It would have been the easy lie. Instead, I said, "I'm fine, but I'd like to keep this about work. I'll get you the logs." Denise hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." I left her office and went back to my desk. My hands were still steady, but my breathing felt shallow. Brent had called my boss. Brent had asked questions about my approvals. Brent had inserted himself into our financial process like he belonged there, and now I had a falsified invoice with a fake version of my signature. I opened our vendor contact list and clicked on the florist's number. My finger hovered over the dial button. If I called them and asked directly, I might spook them. If Brent had already contacted them, they might be compromised. But I couldn't ignore it. I didn't call. Not yet. I did something else. I pulled the email metadata for the invoice file upload. Our system tracked who uploaded documents and when. I navigated through the admin panel I rarely had reason to use, the kind of back-end screen most staff never touched. My cursor moved carefully, like any sudden movement might trigger an alarm. Upload history. The invoice had been uploaded from an IP address that wasn't our office network. It was external. The uploader account listed was mine. My throat tightened. Someone had used my login credentials to upload a falsified invoice from outside the building. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred slightly. It was a clean setup. Not messy. Not random. The kind of move that would create exactly one story. Avery approved an inflated invoice. Avery mishandled vendor funds. Avery is irresponsible with donor money. I felt heat rise under my skin, but my face stayed neutral. I minimized the window and opened a blank spreadsheet for Denise's approval log like I was doing exactly what I'd promised. At lunch, I didn't eat with Marissa in the break room. I said I had a vendor call and took my salad to a quiet corner conference room. I locked the door, set my phone on the table, and called Paige. She answered. I did, I said. Floral invoice inflated by $2,000. Fake signature, uploaded under my account from an external IP. Paige went silent for a beat, then said, Okay, that's your first concrete move from him. That's not just humiliation. That's an attempt to create a fraud narrative. My stomach twisted. How could he get my login? Does he have access to your laptop, your phone? Do you reuse passwords? Paige's questions were quick, clinical. I thought about my home office, Brent's casual way of picking up my laptop to check the weather, his habit of walking into the kitchen when I was typing and leaning too close to the screen. The time he joked, I could hack you in 5 minutes. I'd laughed because it sounded ridiculous. Brent didn't look like someone who could hack anything, but he didn't need to be a hacker if he could just watch. I might, I admitted. I've been careless. Paige's voice stayed steady. Okay, don't blame yourself. Fix it. Today, change every password. Turn on 2-factor authentication everywhere you can. At home, assume he can access your devices. Keep your phone on you. Lock your laptop. And Avery, don't report the fake invoice yet. What? The word came out sharper than I meant. Not yet, Paige repeated. Because if you report it now, the story becomes, Avery discovered a problem and panicked. We need to establish a pattern and tie it to someone else. We need more than a single invoice. We need the hand behind it. My throat felt tight. So I just let it sit? You document it, Paige said. You capture the metadata, you build a timeline, and you create a decoy. A decoy, I repeated, feeling the words settle in my chest. Paige's tone sharpened. If he's using your account from outside the office, he's testing access. He'll do it again. We want him to do it again, but in a way that catches him. I swallowed. My palm was damp against the phone. How? Paige exhaled slowly. I'll tell you after I look at your organization's systems and what you're legally allowed to do. But the important thing is this. He's not just planning to embarrass you at the gala. He's building a case against you, and he's doing it with paperwork. That means we're going to beat him with paperwork. I stared at the conference room wall, blank and beige. On the other side of the door, people laughed softly in the hallway like it was a normal Thursday. Paige continued. Also, who's Greg Hanley to Brent? Board chair, I said. Business guy. Loves networking. Brent would charm him in 10 minutes. Or threaten him, Paige said quiet. Don't assume it's charm. When I hung up, I sat there for a moment with my salad untouched. My appetite was gone, but my mind was sharp. I opened my laptop and started building Denise's approval log exactly the way I said I would. Invoice numbers, dates, approver names, payment confirmation IDs. I included the floral invoice too, but I didn't flag it. I just recorded it like everything else. Because that's what traps look like from the inside. They look like routine. That evening, Brent texted me at 4:56. Dinner W client. Don't wait up. I read the message twice. Dinner with a client. That was his favorite phrase. It covered every absence, every lie, every moment he didn't want to explain. At 6:30, I drove home alone. The house was quiet. Maple met me at the door and pressed her head against my leg. Her fur was warm and she smelled like grass. I fed her, refilled her water, and watched her eat like she had no idea my life was being dismantled one invoice at a time. I stood at the kitchen counter and changed my work password. Then my personal email password. Then my banking passwords. Then my phone passcode. Every time I typed a new password, it felt like stitching a rip back together. At 8:12, Brent came home. He walked in with the same sharp cologne and the loosened tie and the relaxed confidence of a man who believed the world still belonged to him. He tossed his keys into the bowl by the door and looked at me in the kitchen. "Hey," he said, "you okay? You look serious." "I'm tired," I said. He smiled. "Don't burn out before next Saturday. Big night. Lots of eyes." "Oh." He walked past me, close enough that I could smell whatever bar he'd been in, close enough that his shoulder brushed mine on purpose. Then he went to the fridge and grabbed a beer. I watched him drink, watched him scroll his phone, watched him exist in our house like he owned it. And I thought about the fake signature on that invoice. The external IP. The fact that he wanted the room to believe I was messy and unstable. I didn't know yet how Paige would build the decoy. I didn't know yet what else he'd touched. But I did know one thing with absolute certainty. Brent wasn't planning to break my heart next Saturday. He was planning to break my name. Friday started with Brent humming in the shower like nothing in the world had teeth. The bathroom filled with steam and the faint scent of his expensive body wash. And I sat at the edge of the bed putting on mascara with the kind of steady hand you develop when you've spent years pretending you're fine. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. A text from Paige. "Meet me at 7:30. Bring your laptop. Don't tell anyone." I stared at the message until the letters stopped swimming. Then I deleted it from my lock screen notifications and slid my phone into my bag. Brent stepped out of the bathroom in a towel, water on his shoulders, hair slicked back. He looked at me in the mirror like I was an accessory he needed to approve. "Big day?" he asked. "Always," I said, and capped my mascara. He smirked. "Just don't do anything stupid. People are watching right now more than you think." He said it like a warning and a promise at the same time. At work, I moved through the day like I was balancing a glass of water on my head. I answered Marissa's questions about the silent auction bid sheets. I approved the final seating chart. I smiled at Denise when she passed my desk. I kept my tone light, the way women learn to do when they don't want to invite questions. Under the surface, my mind kept clicking through the same list. Fake invoice. External IP. Sponsor record. At 3 to 12 p.m., Greg Hanley showed up in our lobby without an appointment. Marissa leaned into my office doorway, eyes wide. Avery? Greg's here. He asked for you." My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. "Send him back." Greg walked in, holding his phone like it was a badge. He wore a navy blazer and a golf course tan, and he smelled like cologne and entitlement. He smiled like we were friends. "Avery," he said warmly. "How's my favorite event wizard?" "Busy," I said. "What can I do for you?" He perched on the edge of the chair across from my desk, not fully sitting, like he was about to leave at any moment. "I don't want to stress you out," he said, already stressing me out. But Brent mentioned something that got my attention. I didn't react. I picked up a pen and clicked it once, like I was ready to take notes. "What did he mention?" Greg lowered his voice, like we were sharing a secret. "Vendor invoices." He said he saw an approval that didn't look right. I'm sure it's nothing, but donors get sensitive about optics. "Did he say which invoice?" I asked. Greg's eyes flicked. "Florals, I think. Something about an upcharge." My pulse bumped once. He knew. He was here to see how I'd behave. "I'm preparing a full approval log for Denise," I said evenly. "Every invoice, every payment confirmation. If there's an issue, it'll show up." Greg smiled wider, but there was no warmth in it. "Good. That's good. You know, Brent is just trying to protect you too. The gala is a big stage. People notice everything." I felt something sharp behind my ribs. Brent protecting me. Brent had used my name to upload a forged invoice. "I appreciate the concern," I said. Greg stood, smoothing his blazer. Of course. I just wanted to give you a heads up." He paused at the door and looked back at me. And Avery? I know you and Brent have been busy. If there's anything personal going on, this isn't the time to let it spill into work. There it was. The first attempt to label me unstable. I held his gaze. Nothing personal is spilling into work, I said. I'm doing my job. Greg's smile tightened. Great. See you Saturday. When he left, I sat still for a full 10 seconds. Then I opened my spreadsheet and kept working. Because the best way to survive someone watching for cracks is to give them none. At 6:45, I told Marissa I had a quick errand and left. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Paige's office, parked on the street, and walked in with my laptop bag on one shoulder and my purse clutched, like it contained something breakable. Paige met me at the front. No small talk, just a quick nod, and led me into a conference room with frosted glass walls. She'd already set up her own laptop, a legal pad, and 2 paper cups of coffee. Okay, she said, as soon as the door shut. Show me exactly what you saw. I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshots and PDFs I'd saved. Sponsor record. False note claiming I confirmed the speaking slot. Email chain, with Greg's message about concerns. Floral invoice, with the wrong total and the fake signature. Upload history showing my account used from an external IP. Paige didn't flinch. She absorbed it like a person used to seeing the ugly underbelly of polite people. This is good, she said, and the word good sounded strange in that room. Not good for you, but good as evidence. How do I prove it's not me? I asked. Paige tapped the table with her pen. We don't prove a negative. We show a pattern that points to a positive culprit, and we create a situation where he repeats the behavior in a way that exposes him. She slid her phone across the table to me. On it was an app I recognized from my own work life. An authenticator. First, we lock down your accounts. You already changed passwords. Now we add 2-factor to everything you can. Work email, donor system, accounting portal, even your personal stuff. If he tries to log in, he'll need your phone. What if he just takes my phone? I asked before I could stop myself. Paige's eyes sharpened. Does he ever grab it from you? No, I said. Then, more honestly, not yet. Paige nodded once. Then don't give him a reason. Keep it on you. Keep it locked. If you go to the bathroom, it goes with you. She paused, then said, Second, we need to know whether he's using your credentials because he learned your passwords or because he has access to one of your devices. Does he ever use your laptop? Sometimes, I said. He'll pick it up like it's his. He'll say he's checking something. Paige's mouth tightened. Okay. You're going to assume your home network is compromised. You're going to stop logging into anything sensitive from home unless you're on a hotspot you control. And you're going to stop leaving your laptop unattended. I nodded, feeling the humiliation of it in the back of my throat. Not because Paige was wrong. Because I'd lived like a person who didn't need to be careful. And that luxury was gone. Paige turned her legal pad toward me. Here's the decoy, she said. My stomach clenched. Tell me, Asa. Paige leaned in. Brent wants to control the narrative at your gala. He's already inserted himself as sponsor. He's already recruited Greg as a messenger. And he's already tested whether he can manipulate your vendor system. That means he's not improvising. He's building a timeline where you look incompetent and dishonest right before he hands you that envelope. I swallowed. So what's the bait? Paige lifted her pen. A document that looks like it would ruin you. Something that, if it appeared, would make your board panic. My palms went cold. Like what? Paige's eyes stayed steady. A fake reimbursement request. A fake approval. Something that suggests you used donor funds for personal expenses. My stomach turned. That's criminal. Exactly, Paige said calmly. And that's why he'll go for it. Because it gives him the biggest payoff. I shook my head slightly. But how do we don't create fraud. Paige cut in. We create a controlled, clearly labeled internal test document that is never submitted for payment. It's a decoy file, not a transaction. Something that sits in a monitored folder and tells us who touches it. I stared at her. Monitored? Paige slid her laptop screen toward me. Your organization's donor system might be basic, but your accounting portal likely logs access. So does your file sharing system if it's even halfway modern. We're not hacking. We're using normal audit trails. If Brent uses your account again from an external IP to upload or edit a file, that's a timestamp. That's an IP. And if it happens after you enable two-factor, it means he has physical access to your phone or laptop. Either way, it points to him. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So we set a trap. Paige nodded once. And we keep you clean. That means you don't upload the decoy from home. You do it from the office network, during business hours, with witnesses around. You document that you created an internal training placeholder for end-of-year reconciliation or something boring. Then you leave it. And you watch. My pulse was loud in my ears. What if he doesn't take it? Paige's mouth curved, not quite a smile. Men like him don't stop when they think they're winning. I thought of Brent's voice on speakerphone. Get her face. Make sure it's clean. She'll melt down or beg. I thought of Greg's careful little warning about not letting anything personal spill into work. I thought of the fake signature that looked like a child trying to copy cursive. He's going to do it again, I said. Yes, Paige said. Now, third thing. Texas is a one-party consent state for recording in most situations. That means if you're part of a conversation, you can record it. I'm not telling you to go spy. I'm telling you that if he says anything to you, and you're in the conversation, you can document it. My throat tightened. So, if he threatens me, record, Paige said simply. And keep backups. Multiple. I sat back, feeling a strange steadiness settle into me. Not calm. Not peace. Just the clear knowledge that I was no longer moving blindly. Paige pushed a blank page of her legal pad toward me. Now, I want you to write down every place Brent touches your life like it's his. Accounts, devices, contacts, who he knows on your board, who he knows at your vendors. And I want dates. When he started talking about the gala, when he became a sponsor, when Greg started sniffing around, we build a timeline that makes his behavior look like what it is, a coordinated attempt to sabotage. I picked up my pen. I wrote, presenting sponsor, added Friday. Greg email Tuesday. Brent called Denise Wednesday. Fake floral invoice uploaded Monday. Brent texted, dinner W, client Thursday. I filled the page with concrete pieces, not feelings. Every line made the fog lift another inch. When I finally stopped writing, Paige reached across the table and tapped the audio file on my phone, the one from Tuesday night. This, she said, is your anchor. It proves intent. Everything else proves action. Dax dwelled. I nodded slowly. What about Saturday? The gala? Paige's eyes held mine. We don't stop the gala. You keep running it. You act normal. You let him believe the stage is his. Because the moment he thinks he's in control is the moment he'll be careless enough to expose himself. I left Paige's office at 9:12 p.m. The air outside was cooler than it had been all week. The city lights made the sidewalks look silver. I sat in my car for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel, breathing in the scent of my own coffee and the faint leather of the seat. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Brent. You coming home? Don't forget Saturday is important. Wear the dress I picked. I want you to look like you belong next to me. I stared at the message until my vision sharpened around it like a frame. I typed back, of course. I'll be home soon. Then I deleted the sent message from my screen, started the car, and drove back to Plano with the decoy plan sitting in my mind like a match waiting for friction. Because Brent thought the gala was where he'd take everything from me. He didn't understand yet that I'd finally started keeping receipts. On Monday morning, I walked into the office like it was any other week, and not the week my husband planned to turn my life into a spectacle. I wore black slacks, a cream blouse, low heels I could stand in for 10 hours, and a thin gold necklace my mother gave me when I got my first job. I didn't wear the necklace often because Brent said it looked sentimental, like that was an insult. That morning, I wore it anyway. It sat against my skin like a small reminder that I existed before him. Marissa handed me a printed copy of the updated seating chart the moment I sat down. We have a problem, she said, eyes wide with the kind of panic that comes from caring. What is it? Brent Winslow wants his table moved closer to the stage, she said, lowering her voice like his name was something dangerous. He called me directly. Of course he did. Brent always went around the person in charge if he thought he could find someone easier to pressure. What did you tell him? I asked. Marissa bit her lip. I said I'd check with you. He was intense. He kept saying donors should have priority and that he's the presenting sponsor. He can talk to Denise, I said calmly. Not you. Marissa nodded. relieved to have a boundary she didn't have to invent herself. She started to speak again, then hesitated. Avery? Is he always like that? I forced a small smile. He's stressed. Well, it was a lie, but it was also the simplest answer that wouldn't drag Marissa into my personal life. Brent's stress was never about workload. It was about control. I opened my laptop and pulled up the gala file system. Paige and I had talked through what I was allowed to do. I couldn't create something that looked like a fraudulent transaction, but I could create an internal reconciliation placeholder, a draft document for training, the kind of thing nonprofits use to test procedures. Paige had drafted the language so it was clear, if anyone reviewed it later, that it was a mock template. She'd also told me to leave it alone after I created it. No edits from home, no edits after hours. Let the system log the next touch. At 10:13 a.m., I created a folder inside our shared drive labeled 2026 Gala Reconciliation Drafts. Inside it, I uploaded one PDF, expense template do not process training draft. It listed a fictional vendor and a fictional amount, not outrageous, just tempting enough to someone who wanted a lever. It was the kind of thing a saboteur would try to swap out, hoping nobody would look closely. I did it from my desk at the office. Marissa was within eyesight. 2 other staff were in the room. My work computer was on our network. If anyone ever questioned it, it would be simple. I created an internal template during business hours for reconciliation. Normal, boring, legitimate. Then I left it. The rest of Monday was meetings and vendor calls, the kind of day that would normally exhaust me. That week, the exhaustion felt like a layer of armor. I didn't have room for feelings. I had room for tasks. At 2:40, Denise called me into her office. She closed the door and leaned back in her chair like she was bracing for something unpleasant. Greg won't let this go, she said, rubbing her forehead. He's insisting we review your vendor approvals before Saturday. I kept my face calm. I already built the full log. You have it. I know, Denise said, and everything looks clean. But he keeps saying Brent saw something. Brent keeps calling. He's acting like he's doing us a favor by sponsoring, and now he wants to protect the integrity of the organization. The phrase made my jaw tighten. Protect the integrity. That's what people say when they want power without accountability. Denise watched me. Avery, I need to ask you something directly. Has anything ever been mishandled? Even accidentally? No, I said. And I can prove it, Denise exhaled. I believe you. But board politics are board politics. I nodded slowly. Then we handle it with documentation. Denise leaned forward. What's going on with Brent? He's never been this involved. My heart beat once. Hard, but my voice stayed steady. He likes attention. He likes being associated with something that looks good. Denise's eyes narrowed. I stood to leave, then paused. Denise, I want to flag something. Someone accessed our system using my account from outside the office last week. Denise's expression sharpened immediately. What? I chose my words carefully. It may have been a glitch. It may have been saved credentials from a personal device. But I noticed a login from an external IP tied to my account. Extreme example. Denise's face went serious, the way it did when she shifted from nonprofit warmth to executive mode. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted to gather the full access logs first, I said. I have screenshots and timestamps. Denise stood. We need it. We don't really have IT, I reminded her gently. We have a contractor, she corrected. And we have a responsibility. I nodded. I agree. Denise grabbed her phone and started typing. As I turned to leave, she said, Avery, if this is connected to Brent? I don't know yet, I said. That was true enough. I didn't have a clean link yet, and until I did, I wasn't handing anyone a story that could be twisted. That night, Brent came home with a garment bag slung over his shoulder like he was arriving for an award ceremony. He hung it in the closet and unzipped it with a flourish. My tux is ready, he said. Had it tailored. You'll like it. After. Everybody. I glanced at the black fabric, the crisp lapels. Looks nice. It better, he said, walking to the mirror. This gala is important. People are going to remember it. He said it like he was talking about a deal closing, not a cause I'd spent months building. I made dinner while he talked about the venue. The ballroom at the Omni is decent, he said, sitting at the island. But the lighting can be harsh. Make sure you're not sweating in whatever dress you wear. Oh, I won't be sweating, I said. He laughed. Sure. After dinner, he pulled out his phone and started texting, thumb flying. Wade's name flashed briefly on the screen when he tilted it. Brent didn't notice I saw. He was too comfortable. Wade's coming early Saturday, he said casually. He's going to help me with something. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face blank. Help you with what? Brent's smile was small. Just logistics. Okay, I said, and rinsed a plate. He watched me for a moment like he was evaluating whether I'd taken the bait. When I didn't react, he seemed satisfied. Later, in bed, he turned toward me and ran his fingers along my shoulder. It wasn't tender. It was ownership dressed up as affection. You've been quieter lately, he said. More focused. Gala week, I said. He chuckled softly. Just don't get any big ideas. You're good at your little details, but this is a bigger room than you're used to. It's 7 days. I stared at the ceiling fan, turning its slow circles. I understand, I said. He kissed my cheek and rolled away. Within minutes, he was asleep. I lay awake and listened to his breathing. My phone was under my pillow, and my mind was in the office, in the system logs, in the decoy folder waiting for a touch. Tuesday morning, Denise sent a calendar invite titled Vendor Approval Review. Greg and 2 other board members were included. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday at 11, in Denise's office. My stomach flipped when I saw the invite, not because I feared the review, but because I understood what it meant. Brent's pressure was working. He was forcing scrutiny right before the gala, exactly when my time and energy were stretched thin. He wanted me tired. He wanted me cornered. At 9:17 a.m., Marissa walked up to my desk with her laptop open. Avery, you need to see this, she whispered. What? She turned the screen toward me. It was an email sent to Denise and copied to the board chair. The subject line read, Urgent Gala Financial Irregularity. The sender was a Gmail address I didn't recognize. The attachment was a PDF. My blood went cold. I clicked the attachment. It opened to a document that looked exactly like one of our internal templates. Same header style, same footer, except it wasn't labeled as a mock. It listed a personal expense. Luxury weekend lodging $3,200. The approving signature at the bottom was mine. A sloppy imitation, but mine. Under the document was a short message. I'm concerned Avery is using donor funds. Please investigate before gala. My throat tightened until it hurt. That's what the decoy had been designed to catch, and someone had just taken it and turned it into a weapon. Marissa's eyes were wide. Did you? No, I said quietly. I didn't. Denise's office door opened across the room, and she stepped out holding her phone, face pale, eyes locked on me. Avery, she said, voice tight. Come here. Now. As I stood, my knees stayed steady under me. My hands didn't shake. But inside my chest, something shifted into place with a cold, exact click. Because whoever did this didn't just touch the decoy. They touched it confidently, like someone who'd been waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. Denise shut her office door behind me with more force than she probably meant to, but the sound still made Marissa flinch in the hallway. The blinds were half open, letting a thin stripe of sunlight fall across Denise's desk like a line you weren't supposed to cross. She held her phone in one hand and the printed email in the other. Her face wasn't angry yet. It was stunned, like she was trying to decide whether she was looking at a problem or a disaster. I just got this, she said, tapping the paper. And Greg is already texting me asking if I saw it. I kept my voice even. Denise's eyes snapped to mine. Explain. That document is based on an internal template, I said, choosing each word carefully. I created a training draft on Monday for reconciliation procedures. It was labeled as a mock. Someone accessed it and edited it, or repurposed it to look like a real reimbursement request. Itch pad. Denise's mouth parted slightly, then closed. Because we're about to close out event expenses, and we've had volunteers help with data entry, I said. I wanted a clean reference template. Denise stared at me for a beat, then leaned forward. Avery, this is serious. It's accusing you of stealing donor money. I know, I said. I felt strangely calm, like my body had accepted that panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. That's why I need you to look at the system logs. Denise's hand tightened around her phone. We don't have time not to. I cut in. And my voice stayed respectful but firm. There's an audit trail. Who accessed it? When it was downloaded or edited? What IP address? My account has already been used from an external IP once. I told you yesterday. Denise's face shifted. The memory landed. I pulled my laptop out of my bag and opened it on her desk. My fingers moved quickly, but not frantically. I logged into the file system and navigated straight to the folder. The decoy file was still there, but it looked different. The modified version attached to the email was not identical, but it was close enough that anyone not paying attention would assume it was a real internal document. Here, I said, pointing to the access history panel. Denise leaned in. Her perfume smelled like citrus and stress. The access log showed it clearly. Monday at 10:13, file created by me from our office network. Then Tuesday at 11:48 p.m., file accessed from an external IP address. The account used was mine. The file was downloaded. Then, at 11:52 p.m., a new file was uploaded into the same folder. Expense request confidential. PDF. Number 4. Denise's eyes widened. That's last night. Yes, I said. I was asleep at 11:48. Denise straightened slowly. And this is your account. Someone used my credentials, I said. Or someone used a device of mine that was already authenticated. Denise's face went pale in a way I'd never seen. Jesus. I nodded, keeping my voice level. This is sabotage. It's designed to make me look like I'm stealing. Right before the gala, Denise looked down at the email again, then up at me. Who would do this? I could have said Brent. I could have said my husband is orchestrating this, and his friend is filming, and he's planning to humiliate me. The words were sitting at the back of my throat like a match. But Paige's voice was in my head again. Intent plus action. We had action. We needed the last piece that tied it to him cleanly. I don't know yet, I said, and it felt like balancing on a wire. But I can tell you it happened from outside the office, using my account, late at night. That's what the system says. Denise's jaw clenched. I'm calling Greg. And I'm calling the board chair. And I'm calling the contractor, too. Before you do, I said quietly, can I call my attorney? Denise blinked. I held her gaze. This is a false accusation involving donor funds. If this goes to the board without context, it could destroy my career. I need to protect myself and the organization. Denise stared at me for a moment, then nodded. Call whoever you need, but Avery, this is bigger than you. I know, I said, and I meant it, because if Brent could mess with our systems, he could mess with donor trust. And donor trust was what kept kids fed. I stepped into the hallway and called Paige. She answered immediately, like she'd been waiting. It happened, I said. Paige's voice sharpened. Tell me exactly. They accessed the decoy from an external IP last night at 11:48, I said. Using my account. Downloaded it. Uploaded a modified version that looks like a real reimbursement request for a luxury weekend. Then an anonymous email went to Denise this morning accusing me of stealing. Paige exhaled slowly. Good. Not good, but good. You have the access logs? Yes, I said. Denise saw them. Perfect, Paige said. Now you do nothing impulsive. You don't confront Brent. You don't tell coworkers your marriage drama. You keep it clean. Send me screenshots of the logs and the email metadata if you can. And Avery, do you have your phone with you? Yes. Good, Paige said. Because if the account access required two-factor and it still happened, then someone had your phone. My stomach dropped. I turned on two-factor last night. There was a pause. Then Paige's voice went colder. Then it's not just password theft. It's physical access. My mouth went dry. I pictured my bedroom, Brent's hand on my hip, my phone under my pillow, the ease with which he could reach over while I slept and lift it, the way he could point it at my face for Face ID, or use my passcode if he'd watched me enter it, the calm way he'd warned me not to do anything stupid because people were watching. I felt a wave of nausea, but my feet stayed planted. Okay, Paige said. We need to preserve that. The two-factor logs will show whether a code was used, and sometimes the system logs the device used for approval. You'll request those logs. Denise opened her door and looked out. Avery, she said, voice tight. Greg is here. He's on his way to my office. I swallowed. I have to go. Go, Paige said. And Avery, this is the moment you stop being polite. I ended the call and walked back into Denise's office. Greg was already there, standing near the desk like he owned the room. He had his phone in his hand, and that practiced expression of concern, the one men use when they're about to deliver judgment while pretending they're helping. He didn't look at Denise first. He looked at me. "Avery," he said slowly. "What is this?" Denise held up a hand. He didn't. "We have donors flying in," he said. "We have reputational exposure. And now there's an email accusing our event director of misusing funds. It's sabotage," I said. Greg blinked as if he didn't expect me to speak. Denise turned her laptop toward him. "Look at the access logs. The file was created in office by Avery, then accessed late last night from an external IP using her account. Then a modified file was uploaded." This wasn't Avery. Greg stared at the screen. His face shifted, but only slightly. "External IP doesn't prove anything," he said. "People work from home." Denise's voice sharpened. "Our policy does not allow financial approvals from home without board oversight. And Avery told me yesterday she noticed external access on her account." Greg's jaw tightened. That could be a convenient story. I felt heat rise in my chest, but my voice stayed calm. "Greg, why are you so eager to believe I stole donor money based on an anonymous email?" His eyes flicked. "I'm not eager. I'm responsible." "Responsible would be asking for evidence," I said, "not repeating accusations." Greg's mouth tightened. "Brent is a major sponsor. He has an interest in ensuring integrity." Denise's eyes narrowed. "Brent is also Avery's husband. And?" Greg said, spreading his hands. "You're telling me her husband sabotaged her? That's dramatic." The word dramatic was another attempt to label me unstable without saying it directly. I stepped closer to Denise's desk and pointed at the screen. The file was accessed at 11:48 p.m. last night, using my credentials. I was asleep in my house in Plano. I have a dog, a neighbor across the street, and a Ring camera at my front door. I didn't access that system at that time. God in do three. Greg's lips parted like he wanted to argue. Then he stopped himself. He looked at Denise. "We need an emergency board call." Denise nodded. "We will have one, and we will include our legal counsel." Greg's eyes slid back to me. "Are you bringing in your own attorney?" "Yes," I said, "because my name is being accused of theft." For the first time, Greg's confidence wavered. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was calculation. An attorney meant consequences. He forced a smile. "Of course. Transparency is good." Denise stood. "Greg, leave. I will call you. I need to speak with Avery privately." Greg hesitated, then turned toward the door. As he left, he glanced back at me like I was an obstacle, not a person. When the door closed, Denise sank into her chair and rubbed her temples. "This is insane." "It's planned," I said softly. Denise looked up. "Planned by who?" My throat tightened. I could feel the moment pressing on me. If I said Brent, everything would shift. People would look at me differently. They'd wonder if I was biased, if I was emotional, if I was trying to distract from my own mistake. That's how women get discredited. So I didn't say his name yet. Not to Denise. Not without a clean path. "I don't know," I said. "But the timing isn't random. This is meant to hit right before the gala, when there's no room to breathe." 17. Denise's eyes filled with something like anger. Not at me, but at the situation. "Okay," she said. "We're going to do this correctly. We're going to involve the contractor, pull full access logs, and freeze financial permissions on your account until we confirm security." I nodded. "Good." Denise leaned forward. "Avery, I need you to understand this. If the board thinks there's even a chance you misused funds, they will ask you to step aside Saturday. They'll protect the organization. That's what they'll do." My chest tightened. Step aside, in the final week, after months of work, after I'd built every detail. Brent wanted to push me out of my own event and then humiliate me from the stage. "I understand," I said, voice steady. "That's why we have to move fast." Denise nodded. "Go back to your desk. Keep working. Act normal. I'll call you when I know more." I left her office and walked back into the open workspace. Marissa looked up with anxious eyes. "What happened?" she whispered. "Security issue," I said quietly. We're handling it. She nodded, but her fingers were trembling on her keyboard. I sat down at my desk, opened my gala timeline, and forced myself to focus on the next task. Confirm the AV run-through schedule. My cursor moved. My hands stayed steady, but inside my head, a different schedule was running. 11:48 p.m. Access from external IP. Two-factor enabled. Physical access. That meant someone had used my phone while I slept. The thought didn't make me cry. It didn't make me scream. It made me cold. At 4:06 p.m., I got a text from Brent. Everything okay? Heard you've been stressed. Don't embarrass me this week. I stared at the words until my vision sharpened around them. Heard you've been stressed. He was already monitoring the fallout. He knew the anonymous email had hit. He knew the board was buzzing. He was checking whether the story was taking. I typed back, busy day. All good. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I opened my notes app and wrote, Tuesday, 4:06 p.m. Brent texted after sabotage email. Heard you've been stressed. Indicates awareness. I looked at the line after I wrote it. The way you look at a bruise you didn't know was there until you pressed it. Brent wanted me to feel cornered. He wanted me to feel alone. He wanted me to panic so he could call it proof. Instead, I sat at my desk with my gala timeline open, my evidence growing, and my phone locked in my hand. And I realized something else, a piece that made my stomach twist again. If he was willing to use my face to unlock my phone while I slept, he wasn't just planning a public humiliation. He was already crossing lines he thought didn't exist. Wednesday night, I didn't go straight home after work. I drove past my exit on the tollway and kept going until the buildings thinned and the road opened up. Like distance could buy me oxygen. I parked in a grocery store lot under a light that flickered and called Paige again, because the idea of walking back into my house with Brent felt like stepping into a room where the floor might drop. She answered on the first ring. Where are you? In my car, I said. Not home. Good, she said. Listen, Denise is going to freeze your account access. That protects the organization, but it also protects you because it stops any more Avery-approved this documents from appearing. The next move is proving the access came from his side. How? I asked. My voice sounded calm, but my fingers were gripping the steering wheel hard enough that my knuckles looked pale. Paige exhaled. The contractor needs to pull the full authentication logs. Not just IP. Device fingerprint. If the system has it, it'll show the browser or device type. Sometimes it even shows approximate location. And if it points to my home? I asked. Then you stop pretending this is just work, Paige said. Then it's criminal misuse of credentials and targeted defamation. And you make a move that protects you before he makes his. Before he makes his. The words landed heavy, because I could almost hear Brent's laugh on speakerphone, confident that I'd collapse on schedule. I drove home anyway. There was no other option. My life was still inside that house, my clothes, my documents, Maple, the routines that made me feel normal. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. Brent's car was there. The garage door was closed. The neighborhood was quiet in that suburban way that always felt safe until it didn't. I walked inside and found him in the living room with his laptop open, watching something with earbuds in. He glanced up when I entered. One earbud still in. There you are, he said. You're late. Long day, I said, and I kept my purse strap on my shoulder like I was ready to leave again if I needed to. He studied my face for a second. You look tense. I'm tired, I said. He smiled like he liked hearing that. Well, don't get sloppy. That's when people mess up. He went back to his screen. I walked past him without reacting and went to the kitchen to fill Maple's water. She pressed against my leg, warm and solid. I stared at the water stream running into the bowl and focused on the sound because it was simple. It was honest. In the bedroom, I did something I should have done years earlier. I opened my filing drawer and pulled out every important document I could find. My passport, my birth certificate, my social security card, the gala binder I'd brought home, the small envelope where I kept copies of our insurance policies. I didn't take Brent's things. I didn't touch his documents. I only gathered mine. Then I slid them into a plain tote bag and put it in the trunk of my car under an old blanket. If I had to leave fast, I wasn't going to be hunting through drawers while he asked me why I was acting weird. I slept lightly with my phone on airplane mode and Face ID turned off. It felt paranoid, but paranoia was just what people called caution when women used it. Thursday morning, I went to work early again. Denise had the contractor in her office by 9. His name was Kyle, and he looked like a guy who fixed printers and did fantasy football drafts, which was exactly what we had, because nonprofit budgets didn't buy full-time IT. He carried a laptop, a cable bag, and an expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Denise waved me in. "Avery, sit. Kyle's pulling the logs now." Kyle didn't look at me much. He tapped at his keyboard, clicked through admin screens, and muttered under his breath. Denise's knee bounced under her desk. After 10 minutes, Kyle turned his screen slightly so we could see. "Okay," he said. "So your account was accessed at 11:48 p.m. Tuesday. The IP is residential, not the office. The device shows as an iPhone, same model family as hers." He nodded toward me, and it authenticated through two-factor. Denise's face went pale again. "So someone had her phone deleted." Kyle shrugged in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Or someone had an already authenticated session." "No," I said quietly. Kyle clicked into another panel. "It did," he said. "The log shows a push approval." My throat tightened. "What time?" Kyle pointed. 11:47 p.m. Push approved. 1 minute later, access. Denise looked at me like she was trying to process what that meant in human terms. I kept my voice steady. "I was asleep," Kyle scrolled again. "And the access originated within a few miles of this address." He paused, reading. "Plano." The word hit like a slap, even though I'd been bracing for it. "Plano, my home." Denise's voice came out thin. This is someone near you." I didn't say Brent's name. I didn't have to. The air in the room held it anyway. Kyle cleared his throat. "The anonymous email sender is a Gmail, but the PDF metadata shows it was created on a MacBook Pro Word to PDF conversion, and it used a font pack that isn't default on most PCs." Denise blinked. "Does that matter?" Kyle shrugged. "It narrows the pool. Most people here use Windows. Brent used a MacBook. He'd insisted on it because PCs are cheap." Denise leaned forward, voice sharp. "Can you provide a written report of these logs? Timestamp, IP, device, push approval?" "Dine," Kyle nodded. "Yeah, I'll export what I can. I'll redact sensitive info, but you'll have enough for a board review." Denise's shoulders lifted and dropped in a tight breath. Then she looked at me, and her voice softened. "Avery, I'm sorry." I nodded once. I didn't let myself react emotionally, because I knew how easily emotion could be used as proof of instability. "Thank you," I said. "What happens now?" Denise sat up straighter. "Now we call an emergency board meeting. Today, and we remove you from financial permissions for the rest of the week. Not as punishment, but as protection. Kyle will lock down access. We'll announce it as a security precaution." I nodded. "And Brent's sponsorship?" Denise's jaw tightened. "Brent doesn't get to use his money to threaten our staff. I don't care what Greg says." Hearing that made my eyes sting, and I forced the sting down. Denise wasn't a villain. She was an administrator caught between donor politics and basic decency, and she was choosing decency. That mattered. Denise continued. "Also, his request to speak? We're revisiting it." "Good," I said, because my voice had no room for anything else. At 11:30, we had the board meeting on Zoom. Denise had Greg on there, the board chair, 2 other members, and our volunteer treasurer who looked like he'd been pulled out of a dentist appointment. Denise presented the facts cleanly. Anonymous accusation, access logs, 2-factor push approved near Plano, my account used without authorization, internal template repurposed. Greg tried to steer it. "It's still concerning that Avery had an account vulnerable enough to be compromised," he said, in that careful voice that made blame sound like responsibility. Denise didn't flinch. "The concern is that someone deliberately targeted Avery and the organization days before our biggest event. That is not an employee mistake. That is sabotage." The board chair frowned. "Do we have reason to believe it's connected to Brent?" There it was. The name. I spoke before Denise could. My voice was calm and steady. "I'm not here to make personal accusations. I'm here to state facts. The access originated near my home. It used a device matching my phone model. The two-factor approval occurred while I was asleep. The anonymous email was sent right after. The timing aligns with efforts by Brent Winslow to insert himself into gala operations and raise concerns about my work. Greg's face tightened on screen. Brent is a sponsor. He asked questions. That's not a crime. No, I said, looking straight into my webcam. But using my credentials to create fake financial documents is... There was a pause. We should involve counsel. Denise nodded. We are. The board chair looked troubled. For the gala, what do we do? Denise answered. We keep Avery as event director. We remove her from any financial approvals as a precaution. We freeze system access. And we revoke the sponsor speaking slot until we confirm there is no conflict. Greg's mouth opened. You can't revoke. We can, the board chair said, surprising him. Our mission comes first. After, Greg's eyes flicked to me, sharp and resentful, like I'd ruined his tidy narrative. After the call ended, Denise asked me to stay behind. She shut her office door again and leaned against the desk like her legs needed support. Avery, she said quietly, I need you to be safe. This looks like someone in your personal life. I held her gaze. I'm handling it. Denise's voice softened. Do you have somewhere to go? I do, I said. And I meant Paige. I meant the tote bag in my trunk. I meant the fact that I was no longer trapped by ignorance. Denise nodded. Okay. And for Saturday, Brent will still be there. I know, I said. Denise hesitated. Do you want security? Yes, I said immediately. Not for drama. For documentation. Denise nodded once. Done. I'll arrange it with the venue. When I left her office, I didn't feel relief. I felt something cleaner. I'd taken my first real step in front of him instead of behind him. I'd shifted the room, just slightly, away from his story and toward reality. At 2:18 p.m., I got a text from Brent. Just one line. So, I hear you're having trouble at work. I stared at the screen until my hands stopped wanting to tremble. The smugness in the timing was almost obvious. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He hadn't offered help. He was letting me know he'd heard the ripple he created, and he expected me to understand what it meant. I typed back slowly. Everything's handled. See you tonight. Then I opened my notes app and wrote, Thursday, 2:18 p.m. Brent texted within hours of board call, confirms he's tracking. And in that moment, sitting at my desk with the gala timeline open and the board finally looking in the right direction, I realized something else. Brent had built his plan around the idea that I would be isolated, discredited, and too scared to move. He didn't know I'd already started moving first. Saturday arrived like a storm you could see for days, and still couldn't stop. I woke up before dawn and lay there listening to the house. The same hum of the air conditioner, the same distant creak of the hallway floor, Maple's quiet breathing at the foot of the bed. Brent was still asleep, turned away from me, one hand tucked under his pillow like he was guarding something. My phone was in my purse across the room. I'd gotten used to keeping distance between my body and anything he could touch without waking me. I got up quietly and made coffee. The kitchen was dim, the only light coming from the under-cabinet strip Brent insisted on installing because it looked high-end. I stood at the counter, holding the mug with both hands, feeling the heat seep into my palms. My stomach felt hollow, but my mind was clear. I thought of the access logs, the board meeting, Denise arranging security at the venue for documentation, Paige telling me not to be polite anymore. At 7:12 a.m., Brent walked in wearing a t-shirt and gym shorts, rubbing sleep out of his eyes like he was about to have a normal Saturday. He opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and drank half of it in one pull. Big day, he said, like he was talking about a holiday. Yes, I said. He leaned on the counter and watched me. You're calm. I have a lot to do, I said. He smiled, faint and satisfied. He went back to the bedroom, and I heard drawers opening, hangers sliding. He was already in performance mode. Brent didn't attend events. He arrived. I drove to the Omni in downtown Dallas just after 10 with my tote bag on the passenger seat and my gala binder on my lap like a shield. The city was bright and clean in the morning, glass buildings reflecting the sky. Traffic was light. My hands stayed steady on the steering wheel. My stomach stayed tight. Inside the hotel, the ballroom hallway smelled like fresh carpet and industrial air freshener. Staff in black uniforms moved briskly with carts. Volunteers in name tags hovered near registration tables. I walked in and immediately my brain flipped into work mode, the way it always did. Check the stage, check the AV booth, check the auction tables, check the centerpieces. Marissa spotted me and hurried over. "You're here," she said, relief spilling out of her. "I'm here," I said. "How's check-in looking?" "Good," she said. Then her voice dropped. "But Brent's already called twice. He keeps asking where his table is." "He knows where it is," I said calmly. "He just wants you to feel small." Marissa blinked, then nodded, like that made uncomfortable sense. Denise met me near the stage. She looked polished in a navy dress, hair perfectly done, but her eyes were tired. She leaned in close so no one could overhear. "Security is on site," she murmured. "2 guys in suits. They're with the venue. They know to stay near your team and near the sponsor tables." "Thank you," I said. Denise's gaze held mine. "How are you?" I considered lying. Instead, I said, "Focused." Denise nodded once. "Good. That's what we need." By noon, the ballroom had transformed. Warm lights, white linens, gold-rimmed plates. Centerpieces with autumn branches and small pumpkins that looked charming and harmless. The kind of decor that hid the fact that everyone in the room would be there to judge. The silent auction tables were lined with baskets and gift certificates and sports memorabilia. The stage was set with a podium and a screen. A microphone waited on a stand, innocent as a knife on a counter. At 2:30, I stepped outside to take a call from a vendor and found Paige leaning against a column near the hotel cafe, dressed in a simple black blazer and jeans like she belonged anywhere. She didn't smile when she saw me. She didn't ask how I felt. She asked the only question that mattered. "Any new moves?" she said. "None since Thursday," I said. "But he's here. He's already pressuring Marissa." Paige nodded, eyes scanning the hallway like she was mapping exits. "You have your evidence backups?" "Yes." "And Denise has the logs in writing?" she asked. "Kyle delivered them," I said. Denise printed copies. Paige's mouth tightened. "Good. If he tries to corner you tonight, record it. If he tries to speak, let him. The more he talks, the more he exposes." I swallowed. "Wade's coming." Paige's eyes sharpened. "The friend?" "Yes," I said. "He was on the speakerphone. He's the filming guy." Paige nodded slowly. "Then you keep your hands visible and your voice calm. Let him look like the one chasing a scene." I felt my pulse in my throat. "I'm ready," I said, even though part of me still wanted to run. Paige watched me for a beat. "No," she said quietly. "You're not ready. You're willing. That's different. And it's enough." At 4:15, Brent arrived. I saw him before he saw me. He walked into the ballroom hallway like he owned the building. Tux crisp, hair perfect, cufflinks flashing. Wade was beside him in a dark suit, holding his phone in his hand like it was an extension of his body. Brent's mother and father trailed behind, smiling, proud, already basking in whatever social shine they thought this night would bring them. My parents came in a few minutes later, my father in a suit that fit a little too tight, my mother adjusting her necklace and scanning the room with that hopeful expression moms get when they're trying to believe everything is fine. I felt something twist in my stomach at the sight of them. Brent spotted me near the stage and his face brightened. He crossed the room with an easy smile, arms slightly open like he was greeting a partner. He kissed my cheek for show. His lips were cool. "There she is," he said loudly enough that people nearby glanced over. "The woman of the hour." I smiled politely. "We're almost ready." His eyes flicked over my dress. It was deep green, simple, fitted, not flashy. I'd chosen it myself, not the one he'd picked. He noticed. "That's not the dress," he murmured, low enough only I could hear. "I changed my mind," I said. His smile tightened. "Cute." Then his hand slid to the small of my back, guiding me toward the sponsor tables like he was positioning me on a chessboard. "Come say hi to Greg," he said. Greg stood near the bar, talking with 2 donors. He saw Brent and lit up, because Greg loved power the way moths loved light. Brent brought me over like an offering. "Greg," Brent said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Big night." Greg smiled. "Yes, it is." Brent turned to me, eyes bright. "Avery's been under a lot of pressure." Greg's gaze flicked to me, assessing. "I heard there were some issues." Brent's smile didn't change. "We all heard. But she's a tough girl. She'll get through it." Tough girl. Like I was a child being tested. I kept my voice calm. The security report cleared the issue, I said. Denise has the logs. Greg's smile faltered for half a second. Right. Well? Good. Brent's fingers pressed into my back. A quiet warning. Don't bore people with technical stuff, he said softly. Tonight is about impressions. Wade stood behind him, phone angled low. I saw the small red recording indicator reflected in his screen. He wasn't even hiding it. He wanted me to notice. He wanted my awareness to make me react. I didn't. I turned slightly so Wade's camera would catch my face straight on, not in a panicked tilt. Then I smiled at a donor who walked by and stepped away like I had somewhere important to be. Because I did. At 6, the ballroom filled. Laughter. Clinking glasses. The sound of 100 small conversations layered together. Volunteers moved through the crowd with clipboards. The auction tables got busy. People bid on golf packages and spa weekends and a signed Cowboys jersey, sipping wine and pretending generosity was effortless. I worked. I checked with the AV team. I confirmed the speaker order. I made sure the auctioneer had the right script. I kept my posture straight and my face neutral, even when I saw Brent across the room leaning in close to a woman in a silver dress, laughing too hard at something she said. She touched his arm. He didn't pull away. I didn't react. Not because it didn't hurt, but because pain was his favorite tool. If I showed it, he'd use it. At 7:45, Denise tapped the microphone on stage and the room began to settle. People found their seats. Waiters moved like shadows. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen behind the podium glowed with our organization's logo. The moment had arrived, clean and polished and full of eyes. Denise stepped up and welcomed everyone. She spoke about hunger in our city, about children who went home on Fridays with empty cupboards, about the backpacks we filled. The room listened in that polite way. Wealthy rooms listen before the auction starts. Then she introduced the first speaker, a local athlete who served as our ambassador. Applause. A short speech. More applause. Then Denise glanced at her notes and I felt my stomach tighten because I knew what was coming. And now, she said, voice bright, I'd like to acknowledge our presenting sponsor, Winslow Realty Group. My skin went cold. Even though the board had revoked his official speaking slot, his name still had weight in the room. His money still bought him space. Brent stood instantly, like he'd been waiting for a cue. He straightened his tux jacket and smiled, the hero smile. He turned toward the room, soaking in the attention. Wade shifted in his seat, phone in hand, angling for the shot, Denise continued. Brent Winslow and his company have been generous in supporting our mission. And we appreciate. Brent raised a hand slightly, like he was modest. Then he started walking toward the stage. Denise's eyes widened. She hadn't invited him up. She hadn't planned for this, but the room watched him like it was normal. Because men like Brent always act like the stage belongs to them. My heart beat hard once. I felt every eye tracking him. I felt my parents at their table, looking pleased and proud, unaware. Brent reached the steps of the stage and turned back toward the room with that practiced grin. He glanced at me in the front row, just long enough for the message to land. It was time. Brent climbed the steps like he'd rehearsed them, one hand brushing the railing, shoulders back, chin lifted. The lights caught the polished edges of his cufflinks. He reached the stage and leaned toward Denise as if he were doing her a favor. Denise's smile tightened, but she stepped back half a step, because in a room full of donors, saying no to a man holding a $25,000 check is its own kind of risk. Brent took the microphone and tapped it once, testing it like he owned the sound. Good evening, he said, voice warm, confident, filling the room. I won't take up much of your time. The room laughed politely. It was the laugh people give when they assume a charming man is about to be charming. Brent spread his hands. First, I want to thank Denise and this incredible organization. What you all do matters. Truly. He looked out over the tables, letting his eyes land on important faces. He knew exactly how to perform sincerity. And, he continued, I want to take a moment to recognize someone who works harder than anyone I know. My wife. His gaze shifted to me. The room followed it. I felt dozens of eyes settle onto my face like heat. I felt my mother's proud smile. I felt my father's attention sharpen. I felt Marissa's anxious glance from the side of the ballroom. I felt Wade's phone angled toward me, the lens catching my profile. Brent smiled like he was gifting me something. Avery has poured her heart into this gala. Months of late nights, endless emails. She cares so much. He paused, letting the praise land. Then he tilted his head slightly, softening his expression as if he were about to say something tender. And sometimes, he said, voice lowering, when someone cares that much, they can lose perspective. They can make mistakes. The room quieted. The normal drift of conversation stopped. People leaned in. Brent continued. This week, some concerns were brought to my attention. Concerns about financial approvals. Vendor invoices. My stomach stayed tight, but my face stayed calm. Denise's posture stiffened beside him. Greg sat at his table with his arms crossed, watching like a man waiting for a verdict. Brent sighed dramatically. I love my wife. I really do. But love sometimes means accountability. It means saying, enough. He turned slightly, looking down at me like he was disappointed. Avery, he said, into the microphone. I'm not going to let this spiral anymore. There it was. The pivot. The moment he'd been planning, the moment he wanted filmed. He reached into the inside pocket of his tux jacket and pulled out a thick cream envelope. It looked official. Heavy. The kind of envelope that tells a room there's paperwork inside. A ripple went through the audience. People glanced at each other. Someone near the back whispered, "Is that?" Brent held it up like a trophy. I wanted to do this privately, he said, lying smoothly. But with everything that's happened this week, I think transparency is the only way forward. My mother's hand flew to her chest at our table. My father's face went rigid. Brent's voice softened, almost gentle. Avery, I've filed for divorce. The room went very still. Even the clink of silverware stopped. It felt like the air had been sucked out. Brent walked down the steps of the stage with the envelope in his hand, moving slowly, letting the moment stretch. Wade's phone followed him like a leash. Brent stopped in front of my table and held the envelope out to me with both hands, like he was presenting an award. I looked at the envelope. The paper was thick. The flap was sealed. My name was printed across the front in neat black letters. Brent leaned in close enough that only I could hear him. Smile, he whispered. Don't make it worse. I lifted my eyes to his. His were bright with anticipation. He wanted me to break. He wanted tears. He wanted a scene. He wanted proof. My hands didn't shake when I took the envelope. The room watched me like I was a bomb. I could feel the weight of their attention on my skin. I could feel the camera lens on my face. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I didn't open the envelope. Instead, I set it gently on the table in front of me, right beside my water glass. The ice cubes inside the glass clinked softly when my fingers brushed it. That tiny sound felt huge in the silence. Brent's smile faltered. Just a fraction. He hadn't planned for calm. I looked up at him and said, clearly, thank you. A few people blinked. Someone let out a confused laugh, then stopped. Brent's jaw tightened. Avery, he said, trying to regain the moment. You don't need to. I stood up slowly. I didn't push my chair back loudly. I didn't slam my hands on the table. I rose like I was getting up to give a presentation, because that's what I'd done for years. That's what I was good at. Standing in front of people and telling the truth in a way they could understand. I turned toward the stage, where Denise stood frozen, eyes wide. Denise, I said, voice steady. May I have the microphone? The room gasped softly. Brent's face tightened, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of fear. Because the microphone was the one thing he couldn't control once it wasn't in his hand. Denise hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Yes, she said, voice firm. She stepped forward and held the microphone out to me. Brent reached for it instinctively, but Denise moved it away from him with a small, decisive motion. The security men near the back shifted slightly, watching. Wade's phone angled up, hungry for drama. I took the microphone and felt the cool metal against my palm. My voice carried through the ballroom speakers, clear and even. Hi, I said. I'm Avery Winslow. I'm the event director for Harvest and Hope. I paused, letting the room settle into listening. People had expected tears. They were getting something else. I'm going to keep this simple, I continued, because tonight is about the kids this organization feeds, and I'm not going to let anyone use this stage to hurt that mission. Brent's eyes burned into me. His smile was gone now. His mouth was a hard line. I held the microphone steady. This week, an anonymous email accused me of misusing donor funds. That email included a fake document. The room stirred, heads turning, whispers starting. Greg's face went pale. I continued. Our IT contractor pulled the access logs. That fake document was uploaded using my credentials from an external IP address at 11:48 p.m. on Tuesday night. It required two-factor authentication. The access originated in Plano, Texas. Brent's nostrils flared. I didn't look at him yet. I looked at the room, because the room was the jury he'd been trying to prime. Those logs were reviewed by Denise, our board chair, and our legal counsel, I said. They show I did not create that document. It was sabotage. Denise's face steadied. The board chair, seated near the front, nodded once, confirming. A ripple moved through the crowd, shifting from gossip to something sharper. Suspicion. I turned my head then, slowly, and looked directly at Brent. My husband has known about that sabotage. He has been tracking it. He texted me within hours of the board call saying, "So, I hear you're having trouble at work." Brent's eyes widened slightly, and for a second, his confidence cracked. Because he hadn't expected receipts. He'd expected emotion. I lifted my phone with my free hand. I have the messages, I said. I have the timestamps. And I have something else. The room was silent. Even the waiters had stopped moving. I took a breath. On Tuesday night, at 9:42 p.m., I overheard Brent and his friend Wade planning to humiliate me at this gala. They talked about filming my reaction. They talked about where I would be sitting. They talked about handing me divorce papers in public. Wade's face went white. His phone wobbled slightly, and the red recording indicator on his screen flashed as his thumb slipped. Brent stepped forward, voice sharp. "This is insane. She's—" I held up a hand, still calm. "I have the audio recording," I said, and I emailed it to myself before I slept. 17, I have the audio. Brent froze. The room's energy shifted again, the way it shifts when people realize they've been watching a performance and the script just changed. Denise took a step forward beside me, microphone in her own hand now, as if anchoring me. "We have reviewed the logs. We have reviewed the evidence. We are handling this with counsel." Brent's face tightened into something ugly. He tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. "You're really doing this?" he said to me, low. "In front of everyone?" I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt clear. "You chose the room," I said, voice still carrying. "I'm just refusing to bleed quietly." Brent's hand shot toward the envelope on my table as if he could take the moment back, but the room wasn't his anymore. Eyes that had been watching me for weakness were now watching him for guilt, and standing there under ballroom lights, holding the microphone he thought he'd used to bury me, I realized I wasn't just stopping his humiliation. I was about to show everyone why he needed it so badly. The moment you expose someone in public, the room doesn't explode all at once. It shifts in small, visible movements. A donor's eyebrows lifting, a woman at the next table turning her head to whisper to her husband. A fork paused halfway to someone's mouth, a phone being lowered instead of raised. The attention changes direction, like a spotlight sliding off you and onto the person who thought they controlled the stage. Brent stood in front of my table with his mouth half open, like he'd been slapped. Wade's face had gone blank in that way people get when they're trying to look invisible. Greg Hanley looked like someone had drained the color out of him. Denise stayed beside me, upright and steady, and I felt the quiet power of having someone in authority refuse to let the narrative turn on me. Brent tried to recover. He always did. He straightened his shoulders and let his voice rise, warm again, performative. "Everyone," he said, turning to the crowd. "I'm sorry you're being dragged into private issues. My wife she's under a lot of stress. She's hearing things that aren't—" "Stop," Denise said, sharp and clear. The word cut through him like a blade. Brent turned toward her, offended. "Excuse me." Denise didn't flinch. "You are not going to gaslight my staff on my stage," she said. "Not tonight. Not ever." Well, a murmur moved through the room. People didn't always know what gaslighting looked like, but they could recognize an authority figure drawing a line. Brent's smile faltered again. He glanced around, searching for allies. His eyes landed on Greg. "Greg," Brent said, voice tightening. Tell them I flagged concerns because I care about the organization." Greg swallowed. He looked at Denise, then at the board chair, then at the donors watching him. The calculation was almost visible. He didn't want to be tied to the losing side. The board chair stood up slowly at his table. He was an older man with silver hair and a calm, measured presence. The kind of person people assumed was reasonable, even when he was angry. "Brent," he said, voice carrying, "your involvement this week has been disruptive. Our staff presented logs and reports. The allegation against Avery was false. The board has counsel involved. You do not get to use your sponsorship to pressure this organization." Brent's jaw flexed. "So you're taking her word over mine?" The board chair's expression didn't change. "We're taking evidence." That word evidence hung in the air like a verdict. Brent looked back at me, and his eyes narrowed the way they did at home when he thought I'd crossed a line. He lowered his voice, but the microphone still carried enough that people nearby could hear. "You really want to do this?" he said. "You want to ruin me?" I felt my hands tighten around the microphone, but my voice stayed steady. "You already tried to ruin me," I said. "This is the part where you live with what you did." Wade shifted on his feet, and I saw him slide his phone into his pocket, like it was suddenly incriminating instead of entertaining. One of the venue security men moved closer to the edge of the stage, not aggressively, just present, the kind of presence that changes what people dare to do next. Brent's mother stood up at their table, face flushed. "Brent?" she hissed, sharp enough that people turned. "What is going on?" Brent didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me. "Avery's having a breakdown," he said, louder now, trying to make the room hear it. "She's making accusations. She's trying to distract from what?" I asked. My voice was calm, but the question landed hard. Because in every setup, the saboteur is hiding something they don't want to be asked about. Brent's mouth tightened. "From her mishandling money," he snapped. "From her mishandling money. From her mishandling money." I nodded slowly, like I was confirming something for myself. Then, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a thick folder or a flashy reveal. It was one sheet, printed cleanly, with a header at the top. Denise glanced at it, and her expression sharpened. She knew what it was. Paige had made sure she did. I lifted it slightly so the front row could see. "This," I said, "is the contractor's written log report. Timestamp, IP address, device type, two-factor approval, location range." Brent's face went tight, and I saw it. He wasn't just angry. He was trying to calculate an escape route. I continued. "And this is not the only thing we have." I turned slightly toward the side aisle where Paige stood, just behind the last row of tables, watching with the stillness of someone who didn't need attention. She met my eyes and gave a small nod. I faced the room again. "My husband has been telling people I'm sloppy, that I mishandle invoices, that I can't handle pressure. But what he didn't tell you is why he's been so interested in vendor payments." Brent's eyes flashed. "Avery, don't." "I'm going to," I said, and my voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I looked at Denise. "Denise, can you confirm for the room that Brent's sponsorship was pledged through a Gmail address that is not his standard business email, and that someone falsely entered a note in our system claiming I approved his speaking slot?" Denise lifted her own microphone. "Yes," she said. "That happened." A stronger murmur spread through the room. People weren't just watching drama anymore. They were watching a scheme unravel. I turned back to Brent. "You didn't donate because you care about hungry kids," I said. "You donated because you wanted access. You wanted the microphone. You wanted to control the story." Brent's lips peeled back in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I donated because I'm generous," he said. "Unlike you." I nodded once. "Then you won't mind if the organization returns your sponsorship," I said. The room went silent again. Brent froze. Denise lifted her microphone, voice steady. "Effective immediately, we will be returning the presenting sponsorship funds associated with Winslow Realty Group pending investigation into this sabotage," she said. "We will not accept money tied to intimidation or fraud." Brent's face changed. Real fear, finally, because the one thing he valued more than control was the appearance of control. Having money returned publicly wasn't a punishment for him financially. It was a humiliation. It told the room his generosity was contaminated. People started whispering louder. A few donors shifted uncomfortably. One man at a nearby table leaned toward his wife and said something I couldn't hear. But his eyes were on Brent, like he was reevaluating him. Brent stepped closer to the table, voice low, vicious. "You think this makes you look strong?" he hissed. "You look crazy." My father stood up. It happened so quietly that at first I didn't register it. He pushed his chair back and rose. Shoulders squared, face pale but steady. My father wasn't a loud man. He was the kind of man who fixed things and paid bills and believed problems could be handled privately. But now he was standing in a ballroom full of strangers because his daughter was being attacked on a stage. He looked at Brent and said, clearly, "Sit down." Brent blinked, thrown off. "Excuse me?" My father didn't raise his voice. "You heard me," he said. My mother stood too, her hands trembling, but her eyes fierce. "Brent," she said, voice breaking, "what have you done?" Brent looked around and realized the room wasn't with him anymore. The script he'd written depended on me being alone and emotional and ashamed. Instead, he was the one standing under the lights with his mask slipping and his wife holding a microphone like a weapon made of truth. Wade took a step backward, trying to drift away. One of the security men intercepted him gently, a hand lifted in a simple gesture. Not aggressive, just stopping him from leaving too fast. Wade's eyes flicked to the exit, then back to the man in the suit. He stayed put. Brent's voice rose again, desperate now. "This is ridiculous," he said to the room. "You're all letting her manipulate you. I have every right." "You have no right to sabotage an organization," the board chair said. "And you have no right to sabotage a person. Do friend, two off." Brent's face went hard. He snapped his attention back to me. "Fine," he said, voice tight. "If you want to play, let's play. Sign the papers. We're done." He jabbed a finger toward the envelope on the table. I looked down at it, then back up at him. The envelope had been his moment, his cinematic little prop. It was still sealed, still heavy, still official-looking. I picked it up and turned it over once in my hands. Then I set it back down, gently, and I said, "I already did, too." Brent froze. His eyes widened slightly. "What?" I kept my voice calm, but I let the room hear every word. Thursday morning, after the board meeting, I met with my attorney. I filed my own petition, and I requested an emergency protective order regarding digital harassment and workplace sabotage. The air in the room changed again, sharper. People didn't need to know the legal details to understand the power shift. He hadn't been first. He hadn't been in control. Brent's mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was the first time I'd seen him speechless. I turned slightly, looking at the room one last time. "So, we're going to keep raising money. We're going to keep this gala on track. And anyone who thinks intimidation belongs in this mission can leave." Then I handed the microphone back to Denise. And for the first time all week, I felt something like breath return to my lungs. After I handed the microphone back to Denise, my body finally remembered it was made of muscle and bone and nerves. My knees felt weak for the first time that night. My palms were damp. My throat was tight like I'd swallowed sand. But the room had already shifted into motion again, because Denise was good at her job and because donors are trained to move forward when someone tells them to. Denise stepped to the podium and said, steady and loud, "We are going to continue." She didn't apologize for the interruption. She didn't soften it. She simply reclaimed the stage the way you reclaim a house after an intruder has been dragged out. The room followed her lead. A few people murmured. A few people stared at their plates. A few people looked at Brent like he was a stain they didn't want on their clothes. The auctioneer returned to the script. Waiters resumed moving. The sound of silverware returned, tentative at first, then normal again. Brent didn't leave right away. He stood near my table for a few seconds, breathing hard through his nose, eyes darting as if he could still find a lever. His mother clutched his arm and hissed at him under her breath. Wade hovered behind him, pale, avoiding everyone's eyes. Greg sat stiffly, staring at his lap like he'd suddenly discovered shame. Security stayed close without touching anyone. Their presence was enough. It told Brent that the stage was no longer his playground. My father stepped closer to me and put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm and steady, and I felt my eyes sting again. Not from fear, but from the simple fact of being protected without having to ask, "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm okay." My mother leaned in and hugged me fast, the kind of hug that's half comfort and half apology. "Honey," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't her fault, but I understood why she said it. Mothers carry guilt like they carry groceries, even when they don't have to. I'm fine, I told her, and I meant it as much as I could in that moment. Stay seated. Let's just get through the night. Brent finally moved. He didn't stalk out dramatically, because drama was only satisfying when it made him look powerful. Instead, he tried to exit quietly, as if he'd chosen to leave rather than being forced out of the story. Security walked beside him, not touching him, just guiding him toward the ballroom doors. Wade followed like a shadow. As Brent passed Paige near the back, Paige didn't move. She simply watched him with a flat expression that didn't give him anything to fight. Brent looked at her, recognized her, and his eyes narrowed. You, he muttered, barely audible. Paige tilted her head slightly. Me, she said. Brent kept walking. The gala continued. We raised money. People bid higher than usual, maybe because they were trying to cleanse the room of what had happened, maybe because they felt guilty for having watched it. I didn't care why. I cared that the backpacks would be filled. I cared that the kids would eat. I worked the rest of the night like I'd trained myself to. I checked the auction totals. I coordinated the final paddle raise. I made sure our volunteers had water. I smiled at donors when I had to. I kept my posture straight. I kept my face composed. Every now and then, my mind would flash back to Brent's expression when I said I'd already filed. That moment had been worth more than any scream. It was the moment he realized he wasn't the only one capable of planning. At 11:38 p.m., when the last guests drifted out and the ballroom emptied into quiet, Denise found me near the stage. Her heels were off, her hair slightly loosened, and she looked like a woman who had been through something she didn't expect to carry. You did good, she said quietly. Thank you, I said. Denise hesitated. We're going to cooperate fully with counsel. Kyle is preserving all logs. The board chair wants a formal complaint filed. Not just internal, I nodded. Good. Denise's eyes held mine. Are you safe tonight? I thought of the tote bag in my trunk. The documents, the passwords. The fact that I'd turned off Face ID and changed my passcode. The fact that I no longer trusted my own bed. I'm not going home, I said. Denise nodded once, like she understood without me explaining. Okay. If you need anything, call me. Paige walked up then, calm as ever, holding my coat. Ready? She asked. I took the coat and slipped it on. The fabric felt heavy on my shoulders, grounding. Yes, I said. We walked out together through the quiet hotel lobby. The city outside was dark and warm, with streetlights reflecting off the sidewalk. My car was in the garage, but I didn't go to it. Paige had insisted I leave it there overnight. We took hers. On the drive to Paige's townhouse, I stared out the window at the freeway lights and felt the adrenaline drain out of my body, leaving behind a tiredness so deep it felt like it lived in my bones. Paige didn't talk much. She didn't fill the silence. She let it be what it was. When we got to her place, she handed me a spare key and pointed to the guest room. Sleep. I was no. In the guest room, I lay on a bed that smelled like clean detergent and didn't smell like Brent. Maple wasn't there, and that hurt more than I expected. But I told myself Maple was safe in the house, and I would get her soon, with witnesses if I had to. I slept in short stretches. Each time I woke, I checked my phone. There were texts from Brent. They came in waves. 1:14 1:16 This isn't over. 1:22 M. You think you won? You have no idea what you started. I didn't respond. I screenshot them. I emailed them to myself. Then I turned the phone face down and closed my eyes again. Sunday morning, Paige made coffee and set a plate of toast on the counter like she was feeding someone who'd just gotten out of a wreck. I sat at her kitchen island and sipped the coffee slowly. My hands were steady again. That steadiness was becoming familiar. Paige slid a folder across the counter. Here's what happens now, she said. First, you file the police report for the credential misuse and the sabotage attempt. Not because you think a detective is going to kick down his door tomorrow, but because paper matters. Second, you notify your organization's counsel officially, in writing, that your personal device was accessed without consent and used to impersonate you. Third, you get your stuff from the house with an escort. Fourth, you separate finances. I nodded. And the divorce? Paige's expression stayed neutral. It moves, but not on his timeline. After coffee, I called Denise. She answered immediately, voice brisk but warm. She confirmed the board chair had already contacted counsel and that the organization would support whatever official reporting was needed. She also told me something that made my stomach twist again. Greg resigned, Denise said. Effective immediately. I sat still. Why? Denise exhaled. Because counsel dug into the donor record. Greg had been communicating with Brent using a private email thread. He wasn't just concerned. He was coordinating. The picture snapped into place. Greg wasn't just a messenger. He was a door Brent used to get inside my work. Do you think Greg helped him access my account? I asked. Denise paused. I don't know. But the board chair believes he knew more than he admitted. I thanked her and hung up. Paige watched me, reading my face. He had help, I said. Paige nodded. Of course he did. Men like him always recruit someone who wants to feel important. By noon, we went to my house with a police escort arranged through Paige's contacts. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. A uniformed officer stood by the driveway while I walked inside and collected what was mine. Brent wasn't there. He'd left, probably to regain control somewhere else, probably to complain to Wade, probably to spin a story to anyone who would listen. The house looked the same. The couch pillows were in the same place. The kitchen counter was clean. The air smelled faintly of his cologne, like a ghost refusing to leave. Maple ran to me the moment I opened the door, nails clicking on tile, tail wagging so hard her whole body moved. I knelt and buried my face in her fur, breathing her in, feeling my chest loosen. It's okay, I whispered into her neck. I've got you. It's 2-5ing. I gathered a suitcase of clothes, my work laptop, my personal notebooks, and a few sentimental things I refused to leave behind. The necklace from my mother, a photo of me and Paige in college, a worn cookbook with my grandmother's handwriting in the margins. I didn't take furniture. I didn't take dishes. I didn't take anything that would create an argument. I took what I needed to live. On my way out, I saw the framed photo on the hallway wall our wedding day. Brent smiling, arm around me, eyes bright with possession. For a second, I felt a familiar ache, the grief of what I thought my life was supposed to be. Then I kept walking. That afternoon, sitting in Paige's living room with Maple asleep at my feet, I opened my laptop and looked at the gala totals. We'd raised more than our goal. Enough to fund the backpack program through summer, enough to cover a new pantry partnership. I stared at the numbers until they steadied something inside me. Brent had tried to use my work as a stage for my humiliation. Instead, my work had been the place I proved he couldn't erase me. A week later, the consequences started arriving in the way consequences actually arrive in America through emails, formal letters, phone calls from attorneys, board meetings, and the quiet shut doors of people who don't want to be associated with a scandal. Denise called to tell me the organization had removed Winslow Realty Group from all sponsor materials and returned the pledge officially. Brent's generosity was now a stain on paper, documented and rejected. Paige forwarded me a message from a Realtor Association contact. Brent's name had started circulating in a complaint about ethics. Nothing public yet, but it was moving. And then, on a Wednesday afternoon, I got one more message from Brent. You think you collapsed my world. You don't know what a collapse is. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I set my phone down and looked at Maple. She blinked up at me, calm and trusting. Brent was right about one thing. A collapse was coming. It just wasn't mine.